Minions and Associates. If you are already a minion you would like to tithe, please hit like. If you would like to become a minion, please hit follow. If you would like to confess, please do so in the comments. And if you would like to evangelize, please share. So, today I'm talking about unlifing, I will say, for TikTok. I didn't do any show prep today. I know I'm supposed to do show prep. I didn't do a thumb. I didn't do anything. I need to start doing thumbs and just start doing a whole bunch of them together. My son took his life. He took his own life this last October. He had alexithymia, which we're going to talk about. And alexithymia can mess you up. In his case, it ended up costing him his life. Need to add a little bit more light. Okay. Alrighty. This is a hard one. I'm telling you, this is a hard one. There have been 2 autistic people in my life that have died in the last 6 months. My sister-in-law, she lived with us. We all lived together. She had a bowel obstruction. She didn't know she needed to go to the bathroom, and she ended up dying from it. Okay. I don't need the rate. We just need... So I'm going to do this by this... Oh my goodness. I hate it does. Like immediately gives you... Oh yeah, this one's kind of sad.
Hey everyone.
I think I know what he's talking about here in the UK. This is 3 years ago. This is really messed up.
I'm an enterprise sales rep here at Otter, and I want to show you how our new sales specific...
Okay, so the government are pretty much saying that autistic adults can just die.
What happened?
Hey guys, welcome back to the Aspie world. My name is Dan. I have autism, ADHD, OCD and dyslexia, and I make weekly videos on this type of content. So if you're new around here and you'd like to learn more and see more videos just like this one, remember to hit the subscribe button by clicking the notification bell. And if you're watching over on Facebook, be sure to give this page a like and a follow to see more videos just like this one. Alright guys, I don't normally do videos on like a Monday evening, afternoon, but I needed to get this one out. So today, and if you're new to me, actually, if you just come across this video for the first time, I actually put a bunch of like blog posts and other type of stuff on my Instagram and Twitter accounts. So if you want to go follow me on Instagram and Twitter, that'd be super awesome, and you can reach me there as well in my DMs. So yeah, go do that. Okay, so please ignore the fact that I literally just got out of the shower because I just did a workout, but this came to my attention today, and I really wanted to get it done, dusted, and out there and talk about it because it's something that really concerns me. Now, the current government in the UK, I give them the benefit, you know, like coronavirus and everything else that's going on is a difficult thing to do, and it's a difficult thing to navigate through, and yes, it's going to be difficult. And not only that, the Prime Minister did get coronavirus himself and was in hospital on a, you know, ventilation unit. So look, I give everybody the benefit to prove themselves, you know, prove me wrong, prove me, you know, that's fine. This, however, is despicable. This is absolutely disgusting. So I was recently brought to the attention of a tweet by somebody who put a tweet out, and they said the NHS managers ordered that autistic adults, people with learning disabilities and the elderly in care homes have do not resuscitate orders applied to them during the pandemic, and this absolutely demands a public inquiry. Now, I seen this and I was a bit skeptical, and it links to a time. I was a bit skeptical. I seen this and this absolutely demands a public inquiry. Now, I seen this And I was a bit skeptical, and it links to a Times paper article online, but you got to pay for it when I don't subscribe to the Times because I don't subscribe to any kind of national media. So then I went digging a little bit, and I found this article on the Telegraph, and the article on the Telegraph actually states that the NHS asked care homes to place a do not resuscitate order on residents in the height of the pandemic. It also says that a surgery in Somerset was also found to have told autistic adults they should sign a do not resuscitate to prevent resuscitation if they became ill or critically ill with coronavirus. Oh my goodness, like this is wrong. Like that is wrong. I can't even, like, and that makes me scared. Like, you know, what happens if I get coronavirus and then I go to hospital and then
they just let you die.
They look at my records and all that.
They're like, yep, he's autistic, don't treat him. And then then he gets to the point where he passes and they don't resuscitate him.
Autism, and then they're like, oh yeah, this person, don't resuscitate them if they, you know, start getting critically ill.
Why give them medicine? Why even treat them? If you're not going to resuscitate them, they're not worth resuscitating, right? If we're not worth it, then why even give us medicine? Why even treat us?
Can't do that just because someone has a learning difficulty. What is this saying? This is saying that people who have learning disabilities and autism and stuff like that, these people are seen as an issue or someone that's kind of like...
No, less value than a human being. Less than a human being. Because regular human beings you would resuscitate. But something that's less than a human being you wouldn't, right?
A burden on the society or the government or the healthcare system, which is absolutely absurd. No one should be seen as a burden. It's absolutely ridiculous. Everybody's life is precious, and to even think that this is going out, like, you know, a BBC News report reported in April that an autistic...
This is real stuff, people. This is real stuff. It's hard to believe.
Support group told it needed do not resuscitate orders as well, which is kind of like, you know, how can this even be? How can this, like, oh man. But regardless of that, I just want to put my thoughts on it. I think that this is wrong. I think that the government needs to address this officially and say, like, hey, this is what's going on. You know, either it was a mistake or they didn't mean it, or if they did mean it, then what on earth is going on? And we need to take serious thought into our consideration when we vote for our next, you know, political leadership. And, you know, it deeply sickens me because I am just worried for the amount of autistic people who may be in kind of like domiciliary care and home care that will potentially be subjected to coronavirus and then not knowing if they're going to be treated because or left to die because of this ridiculous, horrible notion that's going on. So what I suggest is that I will leave a link to these articles that I found in the description below, and I'll also try and find a some kind of like campaign or something we can sign to like a petition or something so we can get the government to be held account to what on earth is going on here. But if I can't find one of those, maybe we'll start one or something, but I'll keep you updated. Again, follow me on Twitter and Instagram. That's where all my, like, you know, hot topic news is going to come out on those platforms. But I just want to make you guys aware. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. What's going on? Oh my goodness, this is...
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Ongoing and future research. This is 4 years ago. Let's talk about it.
Just thank my Yale to mentors, Dr. Kuhn and Dr. Builder, and my collaborators and my colleagues from the Program of Personalized Health and CCTS.
Okay.
And then I use a lot of data sources that I learned in college.
Nope. Not gonna do that one. That was a and then with an echo in the background. Yeah, not so good. Not so good. Depression in an autistic...
Hey, you got a 9 to 5? Well, I have terrible news for you. You see this
Autism
house?
girls.
You paid for it. You see this car?
Autism in Girls. This is Olivia Hops on YouTube.
Hey everyone, my name is Olivia and welcome back to my channel, Autistically Me. I was recently diagnosed with autism and I want to make some videos to help bring awareness to females on the spectrum. Today I just kind of wanted to do an informal video on what my depression looks like because it's hitting me hard recently, and I just kind of wanted to do.
I think depression's been hitting a lot of autistics hard recently, and I don't know why. I sure can't explain it. I know that at the very beginning of summer, I forget what it's called, but there's a name for it. A sudden little depression thing that kind of, is not uncommon. Is it the beginning of summer? It's not spring. I think it's actually summer.
Like a raw video.
You think it would be like in fall or something, but no, it's like a little spring, like depression
because
thing
I think
or
it'll
something.
help me feel a little better to get out what I'm feeling. So this probably will be a little bit of an intense video, so if you aren't comfortable with that or it could upset you, then maybe don't watch. Depression is a trait many females...
Now, this is very, very serious. Now, she's talking about females, but my son took his life last October. We talked about alexithymia, we talked about the emotions, and I tried to get him to get some mental health, and because of the stigma, he didn't get mental health. Instead, he took his life. So this is a real serious thing. I haven't talked about it, haven't been able to talk about it at all. So this is the first time I'm talking about it, and I think I will be talking about it quite a bit more if I can deal with it.
Females have that are on the spectrum, and males, and a lot of females are, I don't want to say misdiagnosed, because we do.
Yes. A lot of females are misdiagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar, mania, all kinds of stuff when they're autistic. And it happens to this day, and it's going to happen for quite a while until we can get all of our physicians educated, or all the older ones die. Because a lot of the older ones don't... continuing education means nothing to them. That's why they're still diagnosing people with Asperger's to this day.
Do have depression, it's just that's not all we have. We have so much more.
There's another issue that I don't think is necessarily about the time of year. There's a massive disjunct between what?
More things also affecting us.
Oh yeah, man. Okay, at any point in time in the world, you can just say, "Oh, well, this world's just upside down," you know. But right now, we're looking. I think we're at about 1932, 1937-ish. 1932, 1935. That was when the Nazi Party was introduced, and Hitler, well, Nazi Party had been around, but that's when Hitler first kind of basically took control, and slowly, well, not slowly, very rapidly from 1932. It's the same thing if Trump was to be elected. You'd all of a sudden, within a very short period of time, I think the Constitution would just be thrown out and we'd have a dictatorship. And he says that that's what he wants to do, which is really bizarre. I know he was trying to say that, oh yeah, that was a joke, but... and people's day-to-day lives, yeah, I'm having an issue with my day-to-day life. I'm not doing much right now except for this. That's about it. I haven't been going out of the house or doing anything.
I was officially diagnosed with depression at 13.
And that may be true. She may have had the depression, but that's probably secondary to autism. And the physicians, they find the depression and they're right, and they just pat themselves on the back and they're so proud, and then they dump their patient basically because they found it. You're just depressed. And they're not just depressed. They're autistic and depressed, and maybe ADHD. Maybe they do have bipolar, or maybe they do have OCD or whatever else. But the root, I think, is always autism. I think the root of everything that we need to is... Oh yeah. Well, okay, I don't care if you like Trump or not. If you listen to him speak now, the man's incoherent. I can't believe that anyone is even considering voting for this man. He is completely incoherent. He cannot even finish a sentence hardly. And he can't say 3 or 4 sentences in a row and then be on topic or make sense or be joined together. It's really sad. I guess he can say what the teleprompter says, but he cannot go off the cuff anymore. He is mentally not with it, and I am astounded that anyone close to him is even allowing him to. Yeah, it is so weird. I don't understand. Is he being handled? What is going on? I cannot believe that he is so out of it, and everybody's pretending like he's fine. He is very obviously not with it. And why is everybody pretending like he's perfectly fine? And I know Biden's older, and he's gotten confused a few times. And I know he stutters, I stutter. But Trump is gone. Trump's brain is not there. Biden's is deteriorating, as you would expect at his age. Trump's mind is gone. He is not with it anymore. And it's very obvious. I haven't watched Trump or anything, but here recently I've been watching some of his speeches and stuff like that. The man, he is not with it. And I just don't understand why anybody would even pretend that he is. That's really weird. And I'm talking about as a human being. I really feel sorry for him, and it's really sad that people are going around like misleading him into thinking that he's got his shit together, and that they would have the audacity to take the chance that that guy could be president without having his mind. That's crazy. That's completely crazy. You know, you don't want someone to be president that's mind isn't right, and his isn't right now. And if he was to be elected to be president, there's no way he can finish a term as president. There's no way in hell. I personally believe that Donald Trump, if he did not have an entire staff to take care of him, that he couldn't do anything at all anymore. I bet you he could not get up and take care of himself an entire day. And know what to do. As far as like preparing meals and getting his clothes and knowing where he's supposed to be and all that stuff. I bet you he couldn't do it. I know I couldn't do it, don't get me wrong. But I'm not running for president of the United States right now. And at least I know I'm not with it.
So 11 years ago, and I take medication, and I have taken medication for it since I think 15 years old. My depression is intense, and the voice in my head is very, very mean. It thinks of the worst things, and it tells them to me constantly. I'm not good enough, not worthy, a failure, I'm stupid.
So she's schizophrenic. Now she might be autistic, but it sounds like she's talking about schizophrenia.
Stupid.
I mean, she could be autistic and schizophrenic.
I've done a lot of cool things in my life, and I'm very blessed. Grown up in Southern California, gotten to travel the world, never wondered where my next meal was coming from. Got to go to Disneyland like several times a year.
Dang, okay. I didn't know that this was going to go this way. It sounds like this gal is really on the edge right now. This was 4 years ago.
Nice car.
She made it. She made it. Just so you know, she made it. This is 4 years ago.
But
She looks really sad here, though.
Still feel bad. I just feel like really big burden.
Now that's what my son expressed, that he felt like he was a burden. Now he didn't have knees. He couldn't walk very well, and he was experiencing some extreme pain. But one of the things was his inability to walk and so forth was one of the things that was bothering him.
On the people who care about me. Every night in my prayer before I go to bed, I ask God to forgive me for being a terrible person, because
Oh yeah. No, that's crazy too. Okay, you're making me talk. You're making me talk about stuff that I'm probably not supposed to be talking about. Yeah. Okay. So when the Russians invade the Ukraine, we call it genocide in many cases for what happened because of how they did things, like leveling cities and so forth with civilians there. And we say that's not okay, and we help that country. Now, when our friend Israel does the same thing leveling cities, we actually support them. What is going on here? Because the same thing is happening. No, I think it more than people not being able to make their mind. I think it's the buddy system, straight up the buddy system. Well, Israel's our buddy and our friend, so we're going to stick up for them. But Russia's not our friend, you know. It's because of Christianity. It's because of Judaism. That's why. There is an extreme prejudice towards Israel from the United States because of religion. That's all there is to it. It is genocide both in Ukraine and in Gaza. You do not level cities to flush out terrorists. That's the most ridiculous thing that could... to have the audacity to even say that boggles my mind. You know, if somebody slashes a tire, you don't unlife everyone in the neighborhood. Because somebody slashed your tire, you know? But that's exactly what they're doing. I bet U.S. What do you mean, U.S.-centric? Oh, you mean from our perspectives and so forth? Yeah, I think it's hypocritical. I think it's really hypocritical what we're doing to support going against civilians in one place and not in the other. No, most Americans don't probably think like me, or you don't see them. You see all the knuckleheads out there, but there's still a lot of us that have some sense in our head. It's a lot of it is our leadership. Just they're nuts. I can't believe some of it. I am embarrassed by what my leadership is doing and proposing and so forth. I'm flatly embarrassed to be an American. And the thing is this, I'm a veteran. I'm a United States veteran, very proud to serve my country. I'm very proud to be an American, but I am not a nationalist. In other words, yes, I can be a patriot, I can be proud of my country, but when my country does something wrong, they done something wrong, and just because I'm a citizen of that country does not mean I'm going to stand up for that country. If they're wrong, I'm going to say they're wrong, and we're going to take care of it, as far as I'm concerned. Being an American does not give us the right to be wrong. A lot of Americans think that we have the right to be wrong, that we can just do and think whatever we want to as Americans. Americans are snotty. We just think we are the best human beings on the planet, the smartest, the best. In my case, best looking. Moving right along.
I think I'm a terrible person every day. And I ask him to please forgive me for being a terrible girlfriend, terrible daughter, terrible granddaughter, terrible friend.
Now this is really, really common, particularly with the alexithymia, when the emotions get out of control, and they can happen at any time. Now, if you're already depressed, or you've had a period of depression, or you're in autistic burnout, that depression can be even worse. I don't know what happened with my son. He was working out of town, where he worked, he did inventories and stuff, so he worked in different cities every week. So, and he lived in a different city than me, on my old farm. And so, you know, I couldn't keep track of him. I mean, it wasn't my job to keep track of him. You know, he had his life to live and I had to do my thing. But we usually talked once a week or so. Not always. Sometimes we play games on his weekends or whatever. But I hadn't heard from him in about 2 weeks. And he never talked about unlifing himself. He never spoke in that way. He just, I think maybe spend all my money on broadcasting and so forth to see to their demise. Work hard, don't be a nerd. Oh, come on now, how could I not be a nerd?
Terrible sister. Terrible dog mom. I feel so bad for my dog, Blue. He deserves a better mom. And
Oh boy,
Alex,
I had no idea this was going to happen.
So on and so forth. Right now I'm really struggling with money, and I can't seem to get myself to try harder to get more money. I can't imagine having a regular job.
Yeah, my stepdaughter is not taking care of her pets. She got a boyfriend, so she left her dog in a kennel, and it's been 2.5 days. Thank goodness her mom's coming home tonight, because I don't know what to do. If I call it out, then my stepdaughter's going to be pissed off at me for calling it out, and so will my wife. So the dog gets to suffer. The reason my wife will is I can't speak anything negative about my stepdaughter at all under any circumstances. That's the rule, so I just don't talk about her. Because there's not very much positive to say about her at this point in time.
I just don't think that I could have a regular job. I've tried having a regular job, and that always kind of ended in a disaster. And so I started my own business, and I can't do it right now. And some people...
Anyway, my stepdaughter, she was here Friday at about noon, and she hasn't been back. And that dog hasn't had food or water or been out of that cage since. Which is really sad. That's abuse. That is absolutely 100% abuse, and there's not a damn thing I can do about it, which is really sad.
You know...
I hope to hell she doesn't have kids. If that's how she treats her dogs, because she got a new girl, or a new boyfriend. So all of a sudden she just is neglecting her dogs. Which is just bizarre to me.
Say to not just me, but other people with depression, like, just push through it. Like, just move on. Like, get past.
Yeah, I wish we could just push through it and move on, huh? That would be easy. That's you know, when people tell us, well, just deal with it, yeah, you're not autistic. You can't, if we could just deal with it, we wouldn't be autistic.
Past it, but that's not possible a lot of the times.
Oh, okay. She just said the same thing. Get past it, but it's not possible a lot of times. I have time blindness. What happened to me in 3rd grade and what happened to me 10 years ago and last week all seem the same to me. Which is really weird and awkward because I got beat up in the 2nd grade and it seems like it was yesterday. And you realize how awkward it is to seem like yesterday to have kindergartners beat you up and to be traumatized by kindergartners beating you up. 53 years old. I was a correctional officer too, and with the Marines, and still damn kindergartners. I don't fear the enemy. Just don't send kindergartners at me. The recession and COVID upset autistics. The recession, yeah, and it made it hard for us in a lot of respects. In some respects, though, it made it easier because they said, okay, you don't have to go out. And since then, like, I have access to video appointments and stuff like that, so I don't have to leave my house like I used to, which is really great. I really like that. On the flip side of that, then it really does not help my socialization or anything else, but I am much happier not having to go out and deal with shit. I haven't even driven I think I've driven my van. I think I've driven 3 times in the last 2 or 3 years.
No matter how hard we try, on the outside look like I have it all together, and I'm very good at pretending.
And the funny thing is I was a truck driver. I actually was a trash truck driver, so I drove for a living. It's not like I'm scared to drive. I just don't want to go out there. I don't want to drive. I don't want to be out there. I'd rather be at home and be depressed.
Like I do, but I do not. I may have been able to get a job at the NFL Network at 18 years old, but I can barely take care of myself.
Just so you know, this girl did survive this, okay? I know this is really sad and everything, but she did survive. Okay?
On a daily basis.
She's still with us?
People see all of my accomplishments and all the neat things that I've been able to do. Oh, this girl started her own business at 19, got a book deal at 21, worked at Sports Illustrated at 14, got a job at the NFL Network at 18.
Okay, well, okay, yeah. Okay, so filming 81 and saying, yeah, I didn't mean that. I just noticed strangers getting really paranoid after COVID. Now, one very negative thing about COVID is it created what I call personal cults for everyone. This has happened to everyone, and it's been more severe for some than others. But yeah, there's good things too. But like, okay, let's take your cultish MAGA Republicans, your cultish MAGA people. Why are they that way? And why are the flat earthers the way they are? Well, it's the algorithms. See, all the algorithms are designed. Their purpose is to feed us what we want. Okay? They're there to anticipate our wants and needs. You can just put in one letter on a search engine and it's going to pop up with all kinds of stuff you like. Right? So what that does is it creates like a microculture. So that you're only seeing the things that reinforce that you like and that make you good, make you happy. Now, if there's negative things, you're going to see negative things about that. Maybe you don't like the color purple, so you'll get all kinds of feeds about how terrible the color purple is or something. And that's going to happen. And it's going to happen with everything you do. Every aspect on the internet of our lives is there. And there's algorithms on almost every site and every single thing that you deal with. That's what AI is. So for people who had a tendency to be prejudiced or whatever, then that draws them towards those chat rooms and so forth that they want to go to, the prejudice stuff. And then they go to the echo chambers and they keep on hearing the same thing over and over and over and over. And that's because of the algorithm. And because, remember, there was a shortage in GPUs and everything during COVID because so many people were getting online. And to this day, I bet you there's 2 or 3 times as many people online, maybe even more, maybe 10 times as much traffic since before COVID. And it's never going to change. It's never going to go back down from COVID. Our connectivity and how we do things on the internet. Like you could never see a doctor on video, but yeah, I can now. I could see a psychiatrist in Guam right now if I needed to. They could just call me up and we could do a Zoom, right? So in the same way, if maybe I love Teletubbies, okay? I don't know why I would love Teletubbies, but I am a Teletubby fanatic. When I go online, everything I see is going to have Teletubbies on it somewhere. Because the algorithm knows that I like that. The advertisers know that I like Teletubbies. My friends know that I like Teletubbies, so they're sending me Teletubby stuff, and so forth. And it goes on and on and on until I have designed my own. Maybe I like one particular Teletubby. The algorithm's going to know that. And so maybe I may get pictures of this one Teletubby all the time. I can't even remember what the Teletubbies look like. They were kind of silly looking, round if I remember. But anyway, so the algorithm has created our own microcultures, and this has gotten very, very dangerous for us because as human beings, it's reaffirmed our bias. Whether those biases are good or bad, the algorithm of the internet always reaffirms our bias. It does that by design. So we have to be very, very careful that we don't get into our own echo chambers, our own micro cultures. And that's why I try to watch a lot of different news from a lot of different sources from different countries, like Al Jazeera, Sky from Australia, stuff out of Canada if I can, or BBC, whatever. And in fact, I even get some French channels, and French channels I really like. The thing is I like, even then, the algorithm's going to know that I want that and drive me towards that. So then I'll be a news fiend or something. So we just got to be very, very careful with that.
But can't go to the grocery store without having a meltdown. Sometimes I can't get out of bed. I can't shower. I never have a problem eating. I'm always hungry. I'm always eating. When I get depressed, I want to eat more. I want to eat bad foods because they make me feel better temporarily until they make me have a stomach ache. When I get in
sugars. I do the same thing. Our stomachs are so delicate. We have to have the probiotics and so forth for our stomachs. It's so important, so that doesn't happen. But a lot of times, if I eat too much sugar or something like that, yeah, my stomach will start to hurt. So my stomach hurts a lot.
A spell of depression. I definitely kind of seclude myself. I don't want to answer phone calls from my parents or texts or anything. I just am fine feeling like this.
And 2 weeks before my son took his life, he sent me a message and asked if I wanted to play on the computer, and I never turned him down. Never ever would turn him down. That's the reason I kept my phone. But I was feeling very, very depressed that day, and so I just kind of ignored that text. I texted him later, but I lost my last opportunity to talk to him, actually. I think I did. I did text him several hours later, but then he didn't text back. But anyway.
And I don't want to get better. And that it's going to sound stupid or weird, or you're not going to understand, but at least with me, when I'm depressed, I'm content on just feeling miserable and thinking of all of the terrible things that I've ever done in my life, and think about how I'm such a terrible failure of a person. Because that's what depression is. It eats you, and it wants you to keep feeling miserable. It wants you to just go, you know what, I give up. Yeah, I'm just going to stay like this. But you have to have the strength to be able to pull yourself out, and sometimes I just have a very, very difficult time doing that.
And my son wasn't able to do that. And as much as I tried to prepare him, as much as I tried to help, there was nothing I could do. He took his own life. There was not a damn thing I could do. I wish he would have come to me, because I always fix everything. Whatever was going on, I know it would have passed, and I could have made it right. I could have helped him, but he didn't come. Instead, he took his life. And I've been trying not to want to ever since.
And my spells of depression have gotten more scarce through the years, but they still happen. My good friend Todd always told me, this too shall pass, and in my head I know that this feeling will pass.
But the autism doesn't give a shit. You may know it's going to pass. You may know it's going to get better, but the alexithymia does not care. And the alexithymia hits you so hard that you cannot reason anymore. My son was one of the smartest people you could ever meet, ever know. He wasn't stupid. He wasn't one to feel sorry for himself either. He was never a bummer. And the emotions got to be too much. They say we don't have... They say autistic people don't have emotions, and I've got a dead son. Go figure.
But when I'm in that moment, in that feeling, you can't comprehend how you could possibly pass, how you could possibly start to feel better. In a book that I read called Aspergirls, she had a quote.
I'll try turning up the mic a bit.
I can't remember the exact
Thank you.
quote.
I appreciate that.
On me right now, but it basically said, telling an autistic person to just get on with it is like telling a person in the wheelchair to just go up the flight of stairs to get to the second floor. And that really spoke to me, because for the first time it kind of felt like, oh, I do struggle too, and my struggles are validated and real, and they're not fake, and just because they're invisible doesn't mean that I very, very much struggle. You know, social media and stuff, often you only see the good parts of life. You only see the smiles and the laughs and the good memories. But
there's better there, isn't it?
Are also many, if not lots more memories.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I've never seriously thought about taking my own life. I lost a cousin to suicide. But there are times where I wish I could just go to sleep and not wake up, at least for a while. A lot of times I feel in so much pain that I just go and take a nap because I can't stand to be awake and feel like this. So.
And this is very, very common, and I have done the same thing. I've gone to sleep to try to sleep off the worst of the alexithymia. You still wake up bad, but sometimes I did try to sleep through the worst parts.
I hope that when I wake up I feel a little better.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time I do. Talking with friends usually doesn't help because I have to put on my mask, my autistic mask, and appear normal and fine. I don't like telling my problems to other people because I feel like I'm burdening them.
And that's why my son took his life. He felt like a burden. And that's exactly why I'm upset about Autism Speaks, because that's literally what they make us out to be, is a burden. And that's what they preach, that's what they teach, that we're a burden. And my son thought he was a burden and took his life.
I already feel like a burden already, so definitely don't want to make it worse. And I have amazing friends that would be there for me, but it doesn't help. We try so hard to help, and sometimes it does, but for the most part, the only person that can pull me out of feeling like this is me. When I feel like this, I just can't function. I
can't function because it's hot. I'm looking over here, it's 92 degrees in here. Holy hell! I got the window open. I'm on the second story. Looks like the breeze might pick up here a little bit. But boy, is it warm. And the sun's still up. We got about another hour of the sun beating on the side of this wall here. This room is on the western side of the house, so the sun just heats up this outside wall, and this room just gets to roasting.
And I struggle with the thoughts of, you can function, you just don't want to. And so then I go into,
you need to go to bed. Well, okay. I guess so. Just make sure you sleep good. I have narcolepsy, so I never know what my sleep's going to be like. So have peaceful, restful sleep. You have a good one. Thank you. I appreciate you being here.
More guilty, feeling more bad about myself, saying more mean things about myself in my head. And it's a vicious cycle. After my first video was made, I had all these people telling me how strong and brave I was and how I'm helping people. And
I hear you. I hear you. I don't know if it worked. Oh boy, yeah, such is life. You know, I don't know. I have a few tricks. I eat a little bit sometime before I go to bed. Make sure it's quiet, or put on like white noise or whatever. But if I can actually have a nice, peaceful, quiet room where I'm not feeling threatened, then I'm doing pretty good.
I don't feel strong or brave or good. And it brings me joy to know that I'm helping people, but I can't even help myself. So, isn't that kind of hypocritical? Yesterday, I had eaten a big lunch, so I was just going to have a bowl of cereal for dinner because I'm like really addicted to cereal.
Is my mic better now? It looks like it is from what I can tell.
About it in another video. And when I opened my cabinet, I had no cereal. And I almost had a meltdown and I couldn't function for the rest of the night. And then I wake up this morning and I'm like this. A lot of times what happens...
and the next day you may be okay that there's no cereal in there, probably because now you know the cereal's not in there. But that sounds like such a stupid, simple thing. But again, the autism does not care. The autism is going to do what it's going to do and make you feel however it's going to feel, whether or not it is concordant with reality. And my son and I talked about this, and it didn't matter. He still took his life. Alexithymia, when you're having an alexithymia event, your thoughts are not necessarily concordant with reality. What you're feeling is not what is happening. And you know it. Sad thing is it doesn't matter. That's how bad the alexithymia is. That's how much it hurts.
When you have a meltdown, it takes you a long time to recover from it, and sometimes it can send me into depression. And I didn't even have a meltdown last night, just kind of almost. But that's just something that maybe could correlate. I just, again, wanted to kind of share this very real, raw moment with you. Really hope it didn't upset anybody, and I'm sorry that this is like a major downer of a video. I promise next week's video...
That one caught me off guard. That one totally caught me off guard. So I'm just going to go over random things here on the internet that just deals with this.
Pro-Trump warrior
Ron Hanks, too conservative for us.
A new study from the University of Iowa found children with autism who have a higher IQ are at an increased risk for suicidal thoughts. The research examined what they call twice exceptional youth, meaning kids who are autistic and have high cognitive abilities.
KCRG TV9's Nicole Agee explains the findings and why they are concerning.
Researchers say rates of suicide are significantly higher for those who have autism, but it's often thought a higher IQ would lead to fewer thoughts of suicide or self-harm.
It doesn't matter. They're not going to understand here. This is what we were just talking about, and she's not going to touch on it. It does not matter. The alexithymia, the autism does not care about reality, of what's real and what's not real. It does not give a flying shit. You're going to feel however you feel.
This study found autistic children with an IQ of 120 or higher are almost 6 times more likely to have suicidal thoughts than those with an average IQ, which is around 100. Researchers looked at data from thousands of children, combining clinical diagnoses of autism, rates of suicidal thinking, and parent-reported data. In kids who do not have an autism diagnosis, high IQ was protective against suicidal ideation. But the opposite was true for those who were diagnosed with autism.
The opposite was true with those diagnosed with autism. So the more intelligent we are, the more likely we are to take our own lives. That's not fun. Not cool.
Jacob Michelson, lead author of this study, explains how this could support those at risk.
Parents and clinicians should be aware that even if things seem okay on the outside, you'll really want to focus on building self-worth and self-confidence, and that may seem counterintuitive for kids who are high achievers, but also to build acceptance.
Dr. Michelson says more research could expand on these findings. He says they're currently enrolling for another study for high-ability kids that will take a closer look at genetics as well as brain imaging. In the studio, Nicole Agee, KCRG TV9 News.
Hello, my name is Julius and welcome to a new episode of Photoshop Happy Hour where I combine 2 random elements together, and today we'll
okay. I don't even know what to say on that one. Dying young and misunderstood autism in adults. Well, they do know. People who are educated know more than others, and that's what I mean. Is like we know that about alexithymia. We know that the emotions aren't concordant with reality or whatever. But still, nonetheless, the higher the IQ with autistic people, basically, the more likely we are to unlike ourselves. So, go figure. Wait, I want to see what this one is about. Hey, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it, Filming 81. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate talking with you. I really did enjoy it.
Autistic people are dying much younger than others, and much younger than we'd expect. And we're not talking about a few years younger. A population-based study in Sweden from 2016 suggests that autistic people are dying on average 16 years younger than others. And many other studies paint an even bleaker picture.
Hey, Trevor.
I know, that's really hard to hear. I remember reading those statistics almost 5 years ago and being totally shocked. But I think it was really important for me to read about those statistics, because doing so sent me down a completely different research path to what I was expecting. I felt like I needed to shift my focus to understanding why this was happening and what we could do about it. 5 years ago,
I'm gonna have you talk me through it. Well, I'll tell you what my equipment is and everything else, and I might make a network at some point in time here.
There was only one study.
And I figured out what my problem is with my internet, by the way, Trevor. Even though I've got this high-speed Wi-Fi that basically is supposed to be like you can game with, well, it's probably not designed to go play, to have as much. Even gaming, you're not going to put as much stress on it as I do. With all those running all those live streams at once. So basically, I think, like you were saying, I need to just get a Ethernet. So I'm gonna have to talk to my wife and figure out how we're gonna get that done, if we can do it or whatever. I may just be stuck for a while.
The physical and mental health of autistic people that included anyone over the age of 35. Despite autism being a lifelong and what we call neurodevelopmental condition, which means that it's about the way your brain is formed before you're born.
Do you like minting money? Well, the lithium business is for you. The lithium margins right now are practically software margins.
The vast majority of autism research focuses on the experiences of infants and children. And the lack of research on the health of autistic people as they age is really troubling.
And there's very, very little research. There might not be any actually going on about adults. And I'm saying 18 and above. There may not be any serious research going on right now about autistic adults. Not serious research. There may be a small researcher here or there, but not any major studies going on for sure.
Because the recent estimates suggest that over 2% of children, specifically 1 in 44, are now diagnosed as autistic by the age of 8 in the United States. So what is autism? You may have heard about it in popular TV shows and films, but I found that a lot of people don't actually know what it is. The diagnostic criteria outlined 3 core features of autism. The first, beyond...
I'm gonna skip her explaining about the spectrum and stuff. I'm sure that's where she's going. Okay, so...
Neurodiversity describes the idea that autistic people and people with ADHD, mental health conditions, dyslexia, that they all have different brain types. And the really key thing here is that those brain types aren't any more or less valuable than others. And I believe that it's the differences in our brain types that allow us to progress and approach problems in diverse, adaptive, and creative ways.
Yep.
But some autistic people and others who are neurodiverse may also face challenges, and they may need support or assistance in certain contexts. They might even identify with the term disability. But the idea that your brain type is valuable.
I guess I would say I am disabled in the sense that, and I do have to. My condition, whatever it is, does cause disabilities. I don't want to go so far as to say the whole superpower thing or any of that junk. But I definitely, in some ways, have disabilities. In other ways, I have certain gifts. I would say it's balanced in a sense. But I don't just dwell on being disabled, but I just acknowledge where I am disabled and acknowledge where I have strengths. And having done that, it makes it better, it makes it much easier to focus on my strengths to try to compensate for my disabilities.
And also that you might need support or assistance in some contexts. Those two things shouldn't be mutually exclusive. With 1 in 44 people now being diagnosed, every day people are growing and changing and facing new challenges, just as we all are. But the research really hasn't caught up. So you're probably asking yourself, if autistic people are dying so much younger than others, what are we doing about this? And we know some of the reasons why this is, including high rates of mental health conditions, social isolation, and even risk of suicide. A study from last year in Denmark of 6.5 million people suggests that autistic individuals were over 3 times more likely to attempt and die by suicide than others. There are many possible explanations for these alarmingly high rates, including
just imagine the perfect online business you can start in 2024.
Skip. Biological ones, like genetic overlap between autism and other mental health conditions, social...
And we've got, no matter what, no one is just autistic. Remember, autism is neurological. It's a neurological condition. I won't say a disorder necessarily, but it's a neurological condition that has a bunch of other neurological conditions that go with it. Again, no one on this planet is just autistic. That doesn't mean that you always have ADHD, but there's a good chance that you do. There's a good chance you have Ehlers-Danlos, or POTS, or dyslexia, or narcolepsy, or epilepsy, or Ehlers-Danlos, all these different things that have something to do with neurology. All these things are interconnected, and that's why when I say that, when I'm autistic, there's all kinds of other things going on.
Reasons like increased strain and exhaustion from having to mask autism to fit in, but also high rates of trauma and victimization reported by autistic people.
Lots of bullying, and most of us have PTSD or CPTSD.
A study done here at our Autism Research Center in Cambridge in 2019 suggests that autistic people were more likely than others to report 47 out of 60 adverse life experiences, including physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, as well as bullying and coercion. 47 out of 60. Differences in frequency of these traumatic events were not only striking, but also widespread, as autistic people were more likely to report at least one type of vulnerability across all of the 10 categories we investigated. The same study found that mental health symptoms were affected by these adverse life experiences. And I know, that might seem like an obvious conclusion to draw, right? But it's actually really important, because in practice, this finding suggests that if we increase or promote safeguarding to prevent adverse life experiences, we might be able to help reduce high rates of mental health conditions. But we also need to think about whether or not current mental health treatments are going to be as effective for autistic people.
Okay, mental health should be divided up into two things, and that is neurodivergent health and neurotypical health. And because they have to be approached completely differently. And clinicians are still trying to treat autistic brains like holistic brains, and it doesn't work because we're not holistic. Psychiatry is set up for holistic people, and it is almost exclusively needed for autistic people. There is some overlap, but the way you treat a neurodivergent in mental health is different from the way you treat a neurotypical person, because our brains work differently. And different treatments are going to do different things for us. If you try to treat a autistic person as a neurotypical, in the typical mental health system, you're going to do more harm than good. I will say that again, and I am not going to stutter on this, hopefully. Mental health workers do more harm to autistic people than good because they treat autistic people like neurotypical people, like holistic people. And because of that, because they don't know how to treat us differently, because they don't understand us, they do more harm than good. Three times. Mental health workers do more harm than good when they do not take into account neurodivergence. When they are not trained on how a neurodivergent person is different from a neurotypical person, or an holistic person is different from an autistic. If they don't know that, if they can't tell you that, they are not fit to be a mental health worker for autistic people or neurodivergent people. If they don't understand that we need to be treated completely different, they have no place treating us at all. Yet very, very few in the mental health field have any idea about autism or neurodivergence. That's why there's so many neurodivergent clinicians that are doing so well right now, because they actually understand.
As their social communication can be different, therapies reliant on talking, like cognitive behavioral therapy, may not be as effective and may need to be adapted.
Okay, so she's talking about the same thing. It isn't going to be effective because our brains work differently.
So, we know that autistic people have greater risk of mental health conditions, but what about physical health? We know from studies of children and young people that autistic individuals are more likely to experience things like seizures and epilepsy, gastrointestinal conditions, and sleep problems. But it's really surprising.
No, we will have one of those for sure. There's a good chance we have sleep issues, stomach issues, and other issues. We could have balance issues, all kinds of things. Like I said, no one is ever just autistic. You may have audio processing disorder, where you can't hear right like I do. There's so many things that need to be checked once you discover that you're autistic, because there's so many comorbidities. No one is just autistic.
Find out how little we understand about autistic people's physical health as they age. So that's what I decided to focus on.
They say that autistic people don't get worse as they get older, and I think that's bullshit. I know I have. Now, I may have had other mental health things that happen. I had some kind of neurological event that's affected me ever since.
Asked autistic and non-autistic people all about their health in a survey. I asked about their lifestyle, like their diet, exercise, and sleep, their sexual health, their substance use, their personal medical history, and their family medical history.
Did you know that AI is set to create 97
million
new jobs by 2025?
That would have been way too many questions for me. I would have tapped out on that one.
And we recruited just under 2,400 autistic adults to participate, half of which were autistic and half of which were non-autistic. And these were almost exclusively the largest studies of their kind into the experiences of middle-aged and older adults. And unsurprisingly, based on research from younger people and children, we found that autistic individuals were more likely to have chronic health problems, like heart, lung, and diabetic conditions, and were less likely to meet minimal recommendations for diet, exercise, and sleep. But understanding that those challenges with lifestyle behaviors that start in early childhood, knowing that they extend into adulthood, was actually really critical to understanding risk of chronic disease among autistic people. And it begs
you know what? If this is one thing with autistic people, if we decide we like a ham sandwich when we're 3, we're going to like a ham sandwich for the rest of our life. Period. And we're going to be good with that ham sandwich, and we're not going to want it to vary from it's the very simple whatever sandwich that we had when we were 3. That's good. It's okay. Time to go. Time to move along.
Begs the question of why we aren't doing more to help support autistic people in making healthy choices.
And I think diet is I think diet is extremely important. I think that eventually there may be actual supplements just for autistic people, and I'm not talking about breaking from some knucklehead online. I'm talking about actually prescriptions. Like I just got vitamin D from my doctor because I haven't been going, I was a trash man. I lived outside and everything, and now I'm out. I'm not in the sun at all. And so I'm literally vitamin D deficient, which is kind of sad. So I'm having to take
But it's not really clear what would be
vitamin
best.
D.
Be it better health education or increased mental health support, or perhaps institutional changes like employment and housing schemes to help take off financial pressures and stress. Another core area that we looked into was the sexual orientation and gender identity of autistic people. And previous studies had suggested that autistic people are more likely to be LGBTQA+ than others. And I found that autistic people were less likely to be heterosexual and were more likely to be asexual or other sexual orientation. We all,
in fact, there's I would say there's not a lot of strictly straight heterosexual autistics. And they're out there. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of us out there. Well, I'm not straight, but I was, I guess, sort of, maybe. Anyway, but there's not a lot of straight autistics that are straight or don't have some kind of non-binary or gender that is non-traditional. That just tends to be how we are.
Also established that
We're gay.
The majority of autistic people are engaging in sexual activity of some kind, breaking down incorrect stereotypes that autistic people aren't interested in sex. We found
I know some autistic people that aren't, but for the most part, most autistic people that I know of definitely like sex. I've had sex with autistic people. And I could because I'm autistic.
Rates of sexually transmitted infections across the lifetime between autistic and non-autistic people, underlining the importance of equal access to high-quality, safe sex education for all. Similarly, in a study over 640,000 people, using 5 data sets, including one I developed, we asked gender diverse
You mixed up cables.
individuals. And by that I mean anyone who does not identify as cisgender. So people
you had to do it on site, huh?
who are transgender, non-binary, agender, genderqueer, and many other designations. That those gender diverse individuals were 3 to 6 times more likely to be autistic, and they were more likely to have high autistic traits.
Right.
Unfortunately, we know that LGBTQA+ people are still more likely to experience trauma, victimization, and harassment. And as I mentioned before, we know that autistic people are also at increased risk of these same kinds of things. So we need to think really critically about how we can best support and safeguard people with intersectional identities who might be at really high risk of abuse. We also need to think about the way that our language, the language of educators and healthcare professionals, but really of all of us, could be more inclusive and welcoming to people of all identities.
If you want to learn how to edit,
So this is kind of interesting, kind of a rabbit hole I'm going down today.
The final area that we looked into was the substance use of autistic people. And we found that some autistic people were less likely to use substances than others, like drinking, smoking, using drugs. But for those that did use drugs, we found that they were more likely to do so to self-medicate for mental health and for behavior, including for autism. Many autistic people viewed this self-medication as positive, seeing it as an adaptive way of being able to better manage their own needs.
Oh, good.
And I'm of the opinion that we need more research into these areas and the legitimate medical uses of some of these drugs currently deemed recreational. But until that research is done, self-medication can be very dangerous. It can lead to unwanted drug interactions, increased risk of addiction or dependency, and also negative impacts on mental and physical health, including even death. But what I think this study most clearly highlighted is that current healthcare systems are not meeting the needs of autistic people in managing their unwanted mental health symptoms or their behavior. And this is really troubling because though there were no mentions of things like camouflaging or compensating within this study, there were indirect mentions of masking or minimizing autism using drugs. And that is concerning because those kinds of behaviors have been linked, though not causally, to increased risk of mental health symptoms and even suicide.
And
there are many.
Suicide does happen. My son was one of them.
Many possible and valid criticisms of the studies I've outlined here today. One of the biggest ones is that they might not apply to all autistic or non-autistic people. They may be less likely to apply to people with co-occurring intellectual disability, which makes up about 15 to 35% of the autistic community today. The samples were also biased towards people who are white, those assigned female at birth, who live in the United Kingdom and the United States, and those who have a university level education or higher. And despite the fact that, many other studies using different samples and different methodologies, that they come to the same conclusions that we do, what I'm most interested in emphasizing...
Yeah, and the thing is there's all these studies. I don't know how many studies I've found where they said, and we discovered that autistic people do have emotions. And it's like, yeah, we've been saying this for freaking years. All you had to do was ask us. You didn't have to go spend millions of dollars to do a study to find out what the autistic community already knew. But they do that all the time, studying really frivolous stuff, then all they had to do was ask us. And I am serious. Something like that, there's no need to do a study and waste all that money to prove it when we know it's absolutely true.
Is that we need more research in these areas and more research into the experiences of autistic people who are LGBTQA+, those from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds, ethnicities, countries of origin, and with differing levels of intellectual ability. And this is urgent because while limited in nature, the current research suggests dramatic gaps in quality of life, care, and support for autistic people. It suggests that autistic adolescents and adults are facing challenges that we don't fully understand, leaving policymakers, educators, and healthcare professionals in the dark about what we can do to help. So I actually want to challenge today's topic of restoration, because from my perspective as a researcher, we need to totally reframe our approach to supporting neurodiverse individuals in order to provide equity. Policymakers, healthcare professionals, educators, and researchers all need to work collaboratively with autistic people
Yes, with autistic people. And autistic people should always be involved. In fact, not involved just a little bit, but a lot.
To listen to what types of support or adjustments would have the biggest impact on their quality of life. I'd like to thank my funding body.
Okay, that didn't really say much about, let's see, preventing suicide in people with autism risk factors. Okay, we'll see if this isn't too boring.
Services for people on the autism spectrum across the lifespan. Welcome them to share their cameras and get us started in workshops about crisis supports.
This excellent event. I have been in.
It takes autistics a good 5 minutes to get started. So we're still in. Here's the overview of what they're going to talk about.
Prevalence and risk factors. Lisa will then present.
And they were starting at 6 minutes, by the way. So I'm doing pretty good. I'm getting used to this.
Considerations for the warning signs of suicide risk.
Oh, by the way, this is called Echo Autism. This is a YouTube channel. Echo ECHO. Suicide in people with autism risk signs and intervention by Brianna Maddox and Lisa Morgan. And this is, they've got a website, evidently, echoautism.org. I don't know anything about it, by the way. It could be horrible, it could be great, I don't know.
A little bit of information about crisis supports and resources. And then, of course, we'll have a Q&A period at the end. Suicide and autism, what do we know from the research? I will say that at large, suicidal thoughts and behaviors in autism have been under-researched. However, this is a quickly growing area of study. And up to this point, the majority of published studies have focused on prevalence estimates and risk factors. So that's what I'll be focusing on for the next few minutes here. What we know about prevalence is very concerning. There is now convincing evidence that the prevalence of suicidal thoughts and suicidal behaviors are significantly elevated in autistic children, adolescents, and adults compared.
And I would say young adults in particular. Like my son, he was 22. At that age, that's when the alexithymia and the emotions tend to go haywire. I know mine did.
Compared to the general population. In fact, suicide is a leading cause of premature death in autistic individuals.
I understand it's the #1 cause of death. I could be wrong. This is leading cause of is a leading cause of premature death. I thought it was the #1 cause of adults dying on this. Yeah. It's my understanding that suicide is the #1 cause of death for adult autistics.
If we break this down a little bit more, I'll start off just looking at some of the prevalence estimates for autistic children and adolescents. One thing you'll likely note here, these are broad ranges. So for suicidal ideation, on the lower end is about 11% of children and adolescents, and then all the way up to 72%. Suicidal behavior, which would include attempts as well. Again, we see this wide range, and I'm happy to talk more about this in the Q&A period, but I think this really highlights the variability in the samples and the groups that were included in these studies, and also in the measurement or the methods used to
move along.
Assess suicidal ideation at the time with the diagnosis of Asperger syndrome. So these were adults who did not have a diagnosis as children or adolescents, and they were newly diagnosed, which you can imagine.
Look at the spread here, 19.7% and 66% according to these different studies. That is crazy. That is so. It doesn't even mean anything when you got differences like that. It means nothing at all. You can't even average those. Those are so off. Those are not even worth putting on the screen when they're that off. Because something's definitely wrong in the methodologies. of at least one of them.
May have an influence on some unmet support needs that they had earlier in life. And then if you look at this lower end estimate from Dr. Darren Headley and his colleagues in Australia, that number comes from a study that was an employment support study. So those were...
okay, so this is 19.7% of autistic people, and then 66% of autistic. I recognize these statistics now. And this is lifetime suicidal behavior. That's attempting suicide or something like that. 2% of adults, neurotypicals, and 35-36% of
adult
autistic adults
who were employed and had some employment supports. And that may be part of the reason why we see that large discrepancy between those numbers. Similar description for the lifetime prevalence of suicidal behavior, which again includes suicide attempts. We see this highest estimate, the 35 to 36%, in studies with later diagnosed adults and in self-selected samples in people who are using self-report measures, versus the 1.79% from Dr. Lisa Crowan and her colleagues came from a larger analysis of medical records. So lots to...
Okay, this is both autistic people. So this is a wide variety for autistic
lots to
people.
Discuss here and consider.
The methodologies of obtaining the information is so critical in doing statistics.
As I mentioned, the existing research in this area has mostly focused on prevalence and risk factors. Knowing these elevated prevalence estimates, I think a natural next question is why, right? What makes autistic individuals more likely to consider, attempt, or die by suicide? And what we know from the research is that the factors that have been demonstrated to increase the risk of suicide in the general population, so you may remember I said a few slides ago that the research in this area of autism and suicide is still pretty new.
And my son had alexithymia, like I do.
We're on kind of the early side of the research. But if we look to the general population suicide research, which has been around and established for longer, there's some of these general risk factors that we know do occur at higher rates for individuals on the spectrum. And I have some of the examples up there. So maybe at first pass, someone could just say, oh, well, social isolation, we know that's a risk factor of suicide, and people on the spectrum have higher rates of social isolation. So that must explain the link. However, I do want to point out that autistic people are still more likely to experience suicidal thoughts and behaviors in studies where both they and the non-autistic comparison group experience comparable rates of these general risk factors. So that would suggest that there are some additional factors, right, that can increase the risk of suicide among autistic people. And so we want to consider these additional factors, some of which may be specific or unique to autistic individuals. So for this list that I'm about to go through, I do want to make clear that it is not an exhaustive list of risk factors. I really tried to pull the ones that have been most studied and supported in the literature. And the suicide or died by suicide, looking at that subset, more than 90% of those individuals had a co-occurring psychiatric condition.
Nobody's just autistic. There's always other crap going on. Always something else going on. And a lot of times we do have mental health conditions that co-occur with the autism, and I think a lot of it is is from the trauma itself of being an autistic person and all the bullying and BS that we have to put up with as a
autistic person.
Diagnosed psychiatric condition. Anxiety and affective disorders such as depression were the most common, which again I don't think is very surprising. Another risk factor that we are hearing more and more about is the lack of social support, and also more generally speaking, unmet support needs. Multiple studies have found this to be to be a risk factor of suicidal thoughts and behaviors, even after controlling for a number of demographic and diagnostic variables. So just diving into that a little bit more, and Lisa helped with this slide, so thank you, Lisa, for pulling some of this together. I think that an important point here about the unmet support needs is this was defined pretty broadly in the study that found this to be a risk factor. So it could be unmet support needs in the home, with employment, healthcare, finances, social activities, and a few other things as well. And when we think about these unmet support needs and reasons why these needs may be unmet, there are multiple reasons, of course. I think a big one to consider is that asking for help is a social skill. And we know that autistic individuals may have a hard time asking for help. They may not understand who to reach out to or what to ask. And many autistic individuals have had negative experiences in the past reaching out for support due to misunderstandings.
Absolutely. Well, people are cruel. People are absolutely...
People are cruel. That's all there is to it. So as far as my son is concerned, he had mental health challenges, what they're talking about here.
He had the mental health challenges. Now, he did have a good job. The problem with his employment was it caused him pain in his knees because he had 2 total knee replacements, and it caused him extreme pain. Housing, unfortunately, he lived in a fifth wheel, but I don't think he was too worried about that because he was living on his property, basically where he grew up on the farm. Education, he dropped out of high school, but he did get his GED. Relationships, he was having a very difficult time with a girl. We'll just put it that way. I don't think she was a girlfriend, but he definitely loved her.
Or a lack of access, a lack of quality help available. So all of these things would be going into this issue of unmet support needs, and we need a lot more work in this area. The next risk factor that I want to highlight is camouflaging or masking, which is a really important construct that we're learning more and more about right now. And a few studies have come out recently linking camouflaging or masking to an increased risk of suicidal thoughts and behaviors. So for anyone who's not familiar with these terms, really this is talking about masking one's autistic traits in order to try and fit into social situations. And we've got a little bit more information about camouflaging or masking on this slide. It really is it's a strategy. I think we can all kind of wrap our minds around this construct by thinking about a time where you've maybe...
And this masking is something that we do without knowing it. I masked for years. I mean, I was 50 before I discovered I was autistic. I was masking that whole time. I still mask.
You adapted your own behavior to fit into a certain context or setting. Maybe a new place, something that you weren't really comfortable being there. You looked around to see what other people were doing, and you tried to kind of adapt your behavior. This is happening to a much larger extent and on a more frequent basis for many individuals on the spectrum. And the really important point I want to emphasize here is the cost of camouflaging or masking for autistic individuals. The cost can include exhaustion, a lack of sense of self, a lack of support, and this experience of not being known for who they really are.
There's a lot of autistics that say that having to mask all their life basically causes like CPTSD. Basically causes long-term psychological, emotional issues. Just saying.
Because by masking or camouflaging, the people interacting with that autistic individual don't have the opportunity to get to know the true self. I think this point about it does help autistic people socialize in a neurotypical environment, and so that's really the motivation to do it, even at the expense of these costs that I'm describing. And it goes back to some of those prior negative experiences that we know many autistic individuals have had, where when they did show their true selves, they may have been rejected or had other negative experiences. But overall, we need to learn a lot more about how camouflaging can hinder relationships and how it can lead to loneliness, other negative mental health outcomes, and again, this increased risk of suicide.
Okay, so she just stopped.
There we go. Another risk factor that I'd like to just bring back up, I know I mentioned this earlier with Dr. Cassidy's study, a late diagnosis. And this could be related to unmet support needs, of course, if you don't have.
My son, he did not receive a formal diagnosis, but he realized he was autistic about, a month or so before he took his life. Now, the autism didn't have anything to do with it. It was not, he didn't give a shit about being autistic. That didn't have anything to do. He had other things going on. He was not worried about being autistic at all.
Access to a place to get a diagnosis. It could also really be related to masking or camouflaging. So if someone is camouflaging or masking those autistic traits, they may go many years without getting a formal diagnosis of autism. So late diagnosis is a risk.
That's one thing that was really cool when my kids found out that they were autistic, both of them, as far as I know, at least to my face, they were like, okay, whatever. Like, I raised them in such a way that they weren't ableist about it, and they're like, oh, okay, you know, that kind of thing, you know. And I'm very, very proud about that they, I got emotional about it because, hell, I was 50 years old, you know, they were 22 or whatever and been raised by me, so they didn't hate people, and we worked with so many people that were kids that were autistic and stuff like that. Autism was kind of a normal thing for us. Just literally it was a normal thing for us. So like when we discovered we were autistic, it was like, okay, so we're autistic. You know, that was about it. You know, we had to learn a lot, and I definitely have. But yeah, it wasn't like a big deal for us. It's kind of funny in that respect. There was no prejudice or any kind of weird stuff like that.
Factor. Another, I think, interesting...
No internalized ableism or anything.
An important risk factor is being female. Autistic females are at a particularly high risk of suicide. And some wonderful researchers recently published a paper, and I think this adjective of unrelenting really stuck out.
And a lot of times they'll be cutters.
To me, that many autistic...
And if you get a cutter, that's a good sign that they're at a risk for other things.
Autistic women have described these feelings of depression and also feeling suicidal as unrelenting, and it can lead to a really distressing level of hopelessness. And then the final risk factor I want to highlight is something called autistic burnout, which again is a relatively new term. I want to clarify it is not a new experience for autistic individuals, but I think
I don't know how long autistic burnout has been around as a term. I know it's been around at least 3 years, probably 4. This is 2 years ago. So I don't know what she means by relatively new. I don't know if it's 5 years old or 10 years old. I would say at minimum 5 years for sure.
Neurotypical researchers are finally catching on that this is something that we need to be trying to understand better. So Dr. Dora Raymaker and her colleagues published a paper defining autistic burnout and describing some of the negative associations with burnout. So autistic burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic life stress and a mismatch of expectations and abilities without those adequate supports that we've been talking about today. It's characterized by pervasive, long-term exhaustion, loss of function or skills, and reduced tolerance to stimuli. And interestingly, autistic burnout is particularly common in adults on the spectrum who are able to live independently. Of course, this is an experience that's going to vary from person to person. So I hope I don't sound like I'm making any kind of general statements here. Very important to talk to each individual that you're working with or interacting with about their experiences with this. It makes sense to me that this is a result from camouflaging or masking. And when someone is experiencing autistic burnout, they are likely having a harder time managing their emotions. And so this is where that link to suicidal thoughts and behaviors comes in.
And then
what again, if you're interested in learning more about autistic burnout, I would highly recommend.
What happens is that a doctor correctly identifies the depression and thinks that's it. They don't realize that it's the autism and that the depression, which does need to be treated. Don't get me wrong, and it can be with the meds and so forth, possibly. But it's not the causal thing. That's the autism. It's the depression is secondary to the autism, and they just don't do that. And even if they did, they would say, okay, well, you need to go to mental health. And so they send you to a mental health worker that has no clue about neurodivergence, and they do more harm than good. So we're in a real pickle, and we need to be our own voice. Nobody's going to speak for us. We have to do it ourselves.
In this article that Dr. Rainmaker and her colleagues published last year in the journal Autism and Adulthood. All right, so we have been talking some about risk factors of suicide, and I do want to distinguish warning signs, which...
Now for me, there was no warning signs whatsoever. My son worked, he did inventories for like your big... your really big stores like Walmart and stuff like that. He did inventories, and so his crew went around from different cities, every week, and so he would be gone for 4 or 5 days or whatever, and come home. But he would go home to the farm, so I didn't know what days he was home, what days he wasn't, and so every once in a while, maybe on a Thursday, I might get a call, if I didn't get a call, I didn't bother him. He was working or whatever else, and he didn't call me, and it's not, I didn't need to be bugging him all the time. I wanted to give him, I always loved to talk to him, but I also wanted to give him his space. I thought that was important. So he didn't talk to me for about 2 weeks, but I mean, he hasn't talked to me for months at a time, 2-3 months at a time, so that's not unusual, and that's a normal thing for autistic people. My mother did that, I do that, Kate did that, not a big deal. So I just didn't have any communication with him, so being that there was no communication and he wasn't around, he was an adult, there wasn't, I didn't see any warning signs at all. At all. At all. The only thing is I knew that he had this girlfriend that he was dealing with, and that she had a boyfriend. She wasn't a girlfriend to him. They weren't messing around or anything, but he totally fell in love with this girl, and I told my wife that could be very, very, very bad, and it turned out to be. I know somehow she was a factor in his death.
Warning signs are a more immediate risk of suicide. They indicate a more immediate risk of suicide versus risk factors, what I've been talking about, which are characteristics or conditions that make it more likely that individuals will consider, attempt, or die by suicide. And I want to highlight here that there is just less research in the autism field right now on warning signs compared to risk factors. I know some of us here today are working on closing that gap, and Lisa has led some really valuable work on thinking through warning signs and considerations for warning signs. So I'm going to hand it over to her now to present that work.
Thank you, Brenna. So the Autism and Suicide Committee collaborated together to make this toolkit for warning signs and the considerations to be taken when assessing an autistic person. Next slide, please. Are we doing? The structure of the toolkit is to first understand the need for considerations, and then to recognize the differences.
Okay, they are moving on at a snail's pace, so I'm going to move right along. Actually, this Stephanie's really great. Let's go straight to Stephanie. I don't watch her. Stephanie is an autistic person. She is a great presenter as far as what she does. She's extremely well studied, and she also is very hateful towards trans people and towards homosexuals due to God. Because God, she is very, very, very hateful towards trans people and queer people, which is really, really sad. If that was not the case, she would just be amazing. I think I would work with her, but I would also make it very clear that I'm queer and that I support trans people and that those subjects are off limits if I had to work with her. And that's how I'd deal with it. Because on the other hand, she's done a lot more help to the autistic community than I have, so.
I'm Stephanie, and today we're going to be talking about life expectancy and autism. This is a topic that a lot of you expressed interest in, but it can be difficult, especially for some individuals. So this video will be talking about mortality rates, life expectancy, including things like suicide. Now, before we get into the more serious kinds of things, I wanted to address, yes, things are a bit different, aren't they? I am testing out a new setup. I did a few tests and actually asked my patrons and channel members what they thought, and I took their feedback. I brightened it up a little bit because I think I was going a little crazy with how dark I was trying to go, and we'll see how this goes. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of trial and error. I am using a different mic and everything, so lots of different things happening here. Another thing I wanted to point out was some merch. Now, this particular design is pretty new, what I call my beautiful Audi design, because obviously within the word beautiful is Audi in gold, kind of to express that our neurodivergence is a beautiful part of us, our autism is a beautiful part of who we are, and I just thought that was neat, so I put it on a t-shirt and other things. So if you're interested in getting this particular design,
and I've got a Screw Them Flap Harder t-shirt. You go to Patreon, go to the Autistic page, and you can get a Screw Them Flap Harder. There is merch there.
You can go ahead and check out my merch store. It is linked in the description box. So now we're kind of moving into this more serious topic, and again, if you are not okay with mentions of things about why we might be facing a higher mortality rate or an earlier death, etc., and if that's the case for the majority, or if that's just kind of one of those things that people pass around. So that's kind of what I wanted to do in today's video. So
with the mortality rate, I skipped ahead too far because she was going on. The mortality rate, life expectancy, those are often conflated. Your mortality rate can be very young. Your life expectancy is the how long you should live, which is like in the 30s, and then lifespan is how long you could live, which should be about the same as everybody else. So life expectancy, and mortality rate, when you conflate all of those different things, when these studies are looking at those different things, and then we're talking about all of them together, it gets very, very confusing.
To not live as long, and I've heard people try to say it's because society hates us, and I feel like that's a bit broad, and perhaps
suicide, I believe, is the #1 cause of adult autistic death.
Accurate. So I wanted to kind of check out why we might be facing a higher mortality rate or an earlier death, etc., and if that's the case for the majority, or if that's just kind of one of those things that people pass around. So that's kind of what I wanted to do in today's video. So when I went to look into the average life expectancy of autistic people, I ran into the UK's NHS site, and there they kind of analyze or go over this study that is done in Sweden, and it went over the files of over 20,000 people in Sweden.
The Swedish study is considered to be the best study so far.
Who were diagnosed with autism. These people were diagnosed between 1987 and 2009. This study found that the average death of an autistic person was age 54, while their matched controls had an average death of 70.
Okay, that's the life average. Okay, that's not the lifespan. That's the life expectancy. 54. Oh damn! I'm croaking next year, by the way. And then so the life expectancy can be like 78 years old or whatever else. The lifespan can be 54. That's basically the average. But then the mortality rate may be down to 36 or something really young, because of people committing suicide and so forth. So the mortality rate of people dying for whatever reason is much lower, much younger, and that's from getting killed and so forth, rather than natural death. And that's where your life mortality rate is different from your life expectancy. Life expectancy being 54, lifespan being like 78, and I've already passed the mortality rate because I didn't kill myself.
That means, on average, autistic people...
My son became part of that mortality rate of like 34 that you'll hear quoted.
People are dying about 16 years earlier than people matched for age and...
Hey, Trevor, am I making any sense here with the difference in the mortality rate, the life span and life expectancy? Is that making sense?
Other factors. An analysis done in the US in 2018 found a similar pattern, finding decedents with ASD to have died about 20 years earlier than control decedents. Obviously, when you're working with the autism spectrum, there are many variables. This study attempted to work with that by separating these people into two different groups: those who have learning difficulties and disabilities, and those with average to above average IQ scores. All people on the autism spectrum studied, regardless of intelligence score, were 2.5 times more likely to have died during the study than those without autism. The study found the highest risk group to be autistic people with comorbid learning difficulties, especially women who had nearly 9 times the mortality risk of women their same age without ASD. Additionally, people with average to above average intellect scores had 9 times the increased suicide risk. As many may have suspected, those who had learning difficulties, or as this study put it, were considered to be low functioning, were found to have mostly died before reaching the age of 40. They had a 5-fold risk of having died during the study.
That's where your mortality rate comes in, which it can be very young.
While those who were considered high functioning had a 2-fold risk. Out of everyone, the highest risk group were women who were marked as low functioning, having an 8-fold higher risk of death than non-autistic women the same age. To be more specific, the study looked into the chances of autistic people having died due to several different categories, which were the following: infections, cancers, hormonal disorders, mental and behavioral disorders, diseases of the nervous system, circulatory system, respiratory system, or genitourinary system, birth...
And like COVID, we were 30% more likely to get COVID and die from it than people who were not autistic. And that's because somehow autism, the neurological thing, is somehow connected to autoimmune. It doesn't mean that we have a per se autoimmune disorder by any means. However, I would say that we have a higher propensity to have autoimmune issues.
Defects and external causes with self-harm or suicide recorded separately. Except for infections, autistic people were more likely to have died from any of the causes considered, especially epilepsy and suicide. A 2018 US analysis found that decedents with ASD had higher rates of most health conditions. The Swedish study found that autistic people were 7.55 times more likely to die by suicide, with higher functioning individuals at a greater risk than lower functioning, and with women.
So that's 7 times more likely to commit suicide than an autistic person. That's crazy.
And usually more at risk than men. This is compared with the non-autistic population, which sees men at a higher risk for suicide than women. A 2019 study in Utah found a risk of suicide death in autistic people to have increased over time and be greater than in those without ASD between 2013 and 2017. Now, this information I find particularly interesting personally because between 2013 and 2017, we should have seen a rise in understanding and acceptance and awareness for autism. So this could be a dual thing. Perhaps this awareness and acceptance hasn't actually done as much as we thought, or it has widened the net for who is considered autistic and therefore increased the amount of people who would be included in committing suicide as autistic individuals. This second one is probably more likely, and I say that because the DSM-5 was released in 2013, which put Asperger's syndrome on the autism spectrum, as well as a few other diagnoses that were kind of trying to chop up autism into like tiny little segments based on kind of subtypes. So when the DSM-5 was released, that put everything there on the autism spectrum.
And that's because the doctors were screwing up the diagnosis. They were getting so confused by it that they basically just said, let's just make it all ASD. That's the real story of why it actually got changed.
It is possible that now we are grouping in those who are more likely to commit suicide, which would be considered high functioning or higher intellect, which at the time would likely have been considered those with Asperger's syndrome. Additionally, the Utah study found females to be more than 3 times more likely to die from suicide than their non-autistic female counterparts. Young people with ASD were at over twice the risk for suicide than their non-autistic peers, and that autistic individuals in general were less likely than others to die from firearm-related suicides. Other studies...
And that's how my son committed suicide. He used a firearm.
Concur with the significantly higher rates of suicidal thoughts and behaviors in the autistic population, even in one study that also accounted for relevant demographic characteristics in co-occurring psychiatric diagnoses. As for dying as a result of nervous system disorders, primarily epilepsy, autistic people were found to be 7.49 times more likely than non-autistic people, and those considered low functioning were at most risk in this category. A 2013 Utah study found elevated mortality risk in those with ASD with intellectual disability and medical comorbidities related to death, but also compared autistic people to their family controls, which suggested some of the risk observed could be explained by familial factors. Now, while this can be somewhat encouraging, this also could point just to the fact that autism tends to have a genetic factor, and therefore it wouldn't be very surprising to see that the same genetic information that might be causing issues in the child might have come from their family. Among other studies, the most consistent finding for explaining elevated risk in those with ASD is that specific co-occurring conditions, particularly seizures, may be associated. According to the researchers from the Swedish study, this study highlighted the possibility of autistic people being more vulnerable to getting certain diseases that can lead to death, and issues with doctors possibly not being as good at diagnosing and treating diseases in autistic people. As they said, adequate and coordinated medical care for individuals with ASD and research into the phenomenon should be a target for a considerably broader audience of medical specialties than psychiatry and neurology. A 2018 study also found a significant relationship between social communication impairments and suicidal intent among over 5,000 youth in the UK, And a 2017 study found that self-reported autistic traits predicted suicidal behavior in mediation models, with significant indirect effects found through both perceived burdensomeness and thwarted belonging. Simply having autistic traits increases the likelihood of someone feeling burdensome or like they don't belong, which are significant factors in suicidal thoughts. On a personal note, I'd like to argue that autistic people may also need help in understanding that they are suffering from depression or experiencing suicidal thoughts that are beyond what might even be considered somewhat normal. Part of how I experience
having a suicidal thought for an autistic, I would say almost it is normal. It is normal to have suicidal thoughts as an autistic person. That's unfortunate. I'm not saying it's right or it's good, but it happens all the time. My son is dead. This is very serious stuff.
Thymia is having trouble understanding what I'm feeling and to what degree I'm feeling, and especially not really understanding these things until it's really, really in my face and it's super overwhelming. And for me, I suffered with
super overwhelming, and he was overwhelmed to the point where he took his own life.
Chronic depression throughout a large portion of my life and didn't even realize how serious it was. I thought everyone felt this way. I thought it was normal to think the way that I was thinking every single day, every single week. I thought that feeling like I had to bring myself back from the edge multiple times a month was normal, and it's not. Nobody told me that that wasn't normal. Nobody told me that it wasn't normal to be in distress the amount that I was. And when I wasn't in absolute and complete utter distress, I thought, well, I'm fine. It's fine, because I didn't realize what I was feeling on the regular, what it was in the first place, how I was feeling, until it was so overwhelming, and then not even understanding that this isn't normal. So I imagine there must be more people like me who don't realize that it's not normal to feel this way, and maybe have trouble identifying that they're even feeling this way.
It's normal for an autistic.
Till it's a very serious and very dangerous situation. And I absolutely agree that medical professionals really need to step it up when it comes to caring for autistic people. These numbers are sincerely concerning. The amount of autistic people who are committing suicide, contributing to this high mortality rate compared to the average non-autistic person. I didn't recognize how bad my thoughts were and how bad my situation was until I had an honest hour-long intake at a psychologist's office. And it took me talking to someone in that genuine way where I knew I would be safe, and it was safe to just tell them everything, that I was able to come to the realization that this is a serious issue. But most people don't take that kind of time, and especially not with autistic people who have a difficulty of talking to other people and expressing themselves in what you might call socially appropriate ways, who have a difficulty expressing what's going on the inside to put those even into words, especially those with alexithymia. There's just so many issues surrounding it, and it takes people who are purposeful and who actually care to be able to catch these sorts of things. Seeing the absurdly high rate that low functioning autistic people are dying from medical issues is concerning, and it's more frustrating because it's like people are so worried.
Well, my sister-in-law, she just passed 2 months ago. She was 56. She lived in our same house. And she had dyspraxia too. And she didn't know that she had to go to the restroom. And she let herself get stopped up, and they took a gallon of poo out of her. And because she was so stopped up, they had to take away part of her gut, and it was too much, and she died. She passed from not being able to go to the bathroom because she didn't know she needed to go to the bathroom. That's what autism does to you. And she was 56.
Worried on fixing behaviors. Well, take care of yourself. Well, don't be so loud. Can you chill with the stimming? Can you do this and that and this and that? Do you care about the person that's sitting in front of you? Is this person not more than what behaviors they show you? Imagine having to deal with people treating you like you are a burden. How does someone who is constantly treated like they're a burden on their family, whether it's by strangers or by the very professionals before them who act like they can't understand, how are they supposed to not feel thwarted belongingness? Or how are they supposed to not feel like they're a burden? And then, regardless of functioning level, regardless of ability or communication, etc., autistic people, literally shown by studies, are more likely to have everything but infections when it comes to health risks that could lead to death. Autistic people are often considered hypochondriacs because most doctors and medical professionals do not think that it's likely that this person could possibly have all these issues.
And we have a lot of issues just stacked up. A lot of issues.
But we see in the numbers that we really do tend to have more issues, especially medical issues. And when the medical field does not listen, when we finally can
no one, I say this every single day, no one is just autistic. There's always comorbidities. No one is ever just autistic.
Tell you that there's something wrong, people end up dead, and that's just not okay. It's not about people hating autistic people. It's that you have this misunderstanding that somehow we are less able to know what's going on with us. And maybe sometimes it is difficult. We might have interoception issues, but if we have made it to the point that we're in your office telling you there's something wrong, there's something wrong. Now, I didn't really mean to get on my soapbox and rant. This really bothers me.
It's very common for autistic, particularly females, to be not taken seriously by their doctors or just brushed off. They are definitely treated different than men by doctors, and even female doctors will do the same thing.
It bothers me that people like me are being so unheard, that the risk level is so high for suicide and for medical complications. And a lot of these things, obviously suicide can be prevented. A lot of these other issues, if caught, can be prevented. Why won't you listen? Like, why is it that hard to take someone seriously? Why is it that hard? Take the extra steps if someone can't communicate. Pay attention. Pay attention more than, oh no, they did this behavior I didn't like. It's frustrating because it feels like when you see numbers like that, and specifically the causes, it makes you feel like people don't care. I see this trend even just here on the internet, and I know the internet isn't exactly a perfect sample size or a representative sample of people, but the amount of people who have shared their very negative self-image and their negative feelings toward being on this earth is concerning. And I just want you to know that you matter. You matter, and it is worth trying. It is worth.
I love her content, but for some reason, the tone of voice, it sounds like she's like whining to me. It's just a tone of voice. I don't know what it is in this one.
Worth trying to find someone to help. They might not do it perfect, but getting some kind of help is better.
I think maybe she's upset. I think maybe that's what it is.
Than you being off this planet tomorrow. So to the parents, family, caregivers, professionals around autistic people, I encourage you to be on the lookout. Be on the lookout.
Her tone of voice goes higher when she gets stressed. That's what is happening.
For signs of poor mental health. Be on the lookout for situations in even physical health, because not all the time do autistic people understand that this really is a serious issue and this really is something that needs to be addressed. If you can look past the social things that a lot of people have kind of been trained to look for and look at this person as a human being, that would really help. You can help bring these statistics down. Awareness and acceptance can help to bring these statistics down. Access to mental health care and health care that is compassionate and understanding and willing to sit there and take the time with someone who isn't necessarily going to communicate perfectly can bring these numbers down. And we have a lot of work to do, but when it comes to family, when it comes to the autistic people themselves, there is things you can do for yourself. And that is recognizing when your life might be in danger. Take it seriously. Don't wait for next time and the next time or the time that it's serious enough to go in, because you might not be able to go in when it comes to that time. So to calm down after that, I do want to remind you, even as the NHS said on their website when they were going over this study, these numbers, these statistics, etc., they do not dictate your life. That doesn't mean that I'm gonna die before a certain age just because autistic people tend to die before non-autistic people in this number study. You and I are not people who have to have our lives dictated by the study that were shown here. This is for information to be able to change these kinds of outcomes. So I don't want you to walk away from this video afraid or, fearful for your friends or family, or fearful for yourself, thinking like, oh my goodness, this number said this and not that. These are just averages from cases from 1987 to 2009, and some situations in smaller segments in slightly more recent years. That doesn't mean that this is absolutely what will happen to you. So I just want you to be aware, and even
Okay.
Hi everyone, my name is Margarita. Today we're going to be diving in the amazing world of animating and...
This is out of Australia. This is Orion Kelly. This isn't exactly suicide, I don't think. But I haven't heard about these statistics that he's going to be talking about from Australia. And I would like to see what he has to say here.
Shining a light on autism and life as an autistic person. Welcome to My Friend Autism, a podcast breaking down barriers, stigma, and misconceptions around autism while increasing understanding and acceptance of the autistic community. And now, here's your neurodivergent host, Orion Kelly.
Wow. He doesn't do all this intro anymore. Yeah. I like it though. I actually like his little intro. That's pretty cool.
Welcome. Thank you so much for listening to My Friend Autism. I'm Orion Kelly. I'm autistic, and my purpose is to inspire you with knowledge, education, and growth opportunities through these open, honest, and engaging conversations on autism. We are here, my friends, to increase the level of understanding and acceptance of autistic people. Trust me. The findings of this particular report are not only astounding and alarming, they are heartbreaking. The findings on the quality of life of autistic Australians. There's nothing about the findings in this report that are anything aside from utterly unacceptable. Completely and absolutely unacceptable. Okay, so this is what happened. In 2019, the Senate of Australia, so we're not going to get into the whole Westminster political system, but basically, we have the two houses, federal parliament, that is, the two houses. You got the House of Reps and you got the Senate. Okay, so the Senate, they put together a thing called the Select Committee on Autism. Okay, so the Australian Senate did a Select Committee on Autism. Services, support and life outcomes for autistic Australians. In March 2022, the final, report and recommendations were released. What I want to do on this podcast is basically share with you the executive summary findings. And then we can dig a little bit deeper and then talk about how this makes you feel as an autistic person. Keep in mind, these are findings from Australia, a relatively successful, developed country, right? We're not talking about a developing third world country, right? I'm going to read to you verbatim. Okay, I'm just going to read the report, and of course I'll chime in from time to time. Okay, executive summary. The evidence provided over the course of this inquiry provides a compelling case for change. Autistic Australians and their families are often discriminated against and have difficulty accessing the services and supports that they need. Maintaining the status quo is simply not an option. Now, this is reported in a Senate report, okay? This is in writing from elected representatives. At the centre of the committee's proposed reform pathway, now this is basically the big ticket item. They propose a national autism strategy. This strategy would coordinate efforts to improve life outcomes for autistic people and have clear and measurable goals by which progress can be tracked.
Now, one thing that they've said, it was like 162 times in this document that they said well-being, autistic well-being. They really did try to address the well-being of the autistic well-being, and it was over and over and over. In the United States, there's really no actual comparable legislation or anything like that, but there has been documents and so forth put through the American government, and the term well-being has never been mentioned. Whereas in this one document, it's like 162 times or something like that. Freaking amazing.
So here's the part that broke my heart. Here's the part you don't want to hear. If you're an autistic person or you have an autistic person in your life, this is the part you do not want to hear. You want to hear it, but you don't want to hear it. Okay, so as part of the executive summary, big bold writing, life outcomes for autistic Australians are unacceptably poor. This comes at an enormous personal, social, and economic cost. Hi, I'm Orion, I'm autistic. I've been saying that in my videos and my podcasts for quite a while now. Elected representatives have put in writing, they are actually admitting autistic Australians have unacceptably poor life outcomes. We'll get back to you. I mean, it's a report and they've done the work great. Where's the action? Not the action about, oh, we've got 3 different people presenting the report, 3 different politicians. I don't give a crap about these silly photo ops. Fix it. You found the truth, you fix it. Okay, back to the executive summary. This is the part, me talking again, this is the part that you want to hear. Okay, check this out. These are actual facts. Autistic people in Australia between 2019 and 2022 when the research, when the study, the whatever you want to call it, was done. Okay? Autistic people have a life expectancy more than 20 years shorter than the general population, with more than twice the mortality rate. This isn't a study done across the world by the UN. This is actually a governmentally run consultation, investigation, report thing, select committee, whatever you want to call it.
And those numbers are absolutely consistent with what I would expect to see from any other country. Autism is not prejudice. It does not care. It goes after everybody.
Done in Australia from 2019 to 20.
Although I kind of wonder if Scandinavians aren't more autistic than others. I think there's some groups of people that are probably more autistic than others. I could be wrong.
2022. Modern day Australia. I'm autistic. I'm Australian. I have a life expectancy more than 20 years shorter than the general population of Australia, including my wife. I'm not making this stuff up. You can search it yourself. Find it online yourself. The Senate Select Committee, right? It's right there on autism. Australian government. It's free. You can download the PDF right now on the website. Read it along with me. This is legit. I'll continue on. Autistic people experience high rates of co-occurring mental health conditions and are more likely to attempt or commit suicide than other groups. Now, before we move on, I just want to quickly say, if you or someone you know seems like or believes they need help or needs to talk to someone, please reach out to organisations within your region. In Australia, things like Kids Helpline, Lifeline, Beyond Blue, or whoever it is in your region. If you or someone you know needs help, please reach out to these people. They are there to help you, and you deserve help. Here I am, an autistic guy, an autistic dad, an autistic husband. I sit down to read a Senate report findings on autism. The first 3 lines of the executive summary. I've got a life expectancy 20 years less, more than twice the mortality rate, co-occurring mental health conditions, and I'm more likely to attempt or commit suicide than any other group. We're talking about autistic people in modern day Australia. This is astounding. When you're an autistic person, you don't have to read these facts to know that life is just a bit overwhelming. And it's just, what's the point? What am I offering? What am I providing? I don't see any worth. The government don't see any worth. They've done a report for 3 years. They've put it out. Okay, what are you doing? I mean, what are you doing yesterday? What are you doing not in 2 years?
Okay, he's kind of going off on a tangent on his government. I'm going to see if he gets done with this and gets into something else. Because he's just pissed off about his government right now.
Well, the unemployment rate for autistic people is almost 8 times that of people without disability.
And I would expect that to be consistent in other countries too.
Unemployment rate for autistic people in Australia is almost 8 times that of people without disability. Autistic people appear to be overrepresented in the justice system and at a higher risk of homelessness than the general population. We are talking about autistic Australia.
Okay, so absolutely. Autistic people are more likely to be arrested and abused by the police because we're autistic. In other words, there are people in prison solely because they are autistic. Let me say that again. We have people in prison because the cops didn't know how to deal with them, and they misinterpreted their meltdowns or whatever. They put a lot of poetic license to their reports. And we have people in prison just only because they are autistic. I spent 15 years in the system as a correctional officer. I am telling you right now, for sure, there are most of the people that are autistic in prison are in prison not because of crimes they committed, but because they are autistic. And the police simply went after them because they were autistic. And fudged the reports. And their little attitudes are what put those autistic people in prison. Not any crime they committed. Guarantee you 1,000%. Guarantee you.
Millions. People that have a medically diagnosed neuro.
These autistic people were put in prison by predators. Police, crook, predators. The worst predators you can get are not in prison. They're wearing a badge.
Developmental disability. Every time I think about this, it makes me feel really upset. I've got to keep going.
Yeah, me too.
More of the report. Inclusion of autistic people in the community is also poor. Oh, really? Oh, really?
You know what? This report could just be in the United States or France or the UK or Ireland or whatever. Except for the Canadians. They're all too polite.
Many autistic Australians experiencing loneliness, isolation, exclusion, and discrimination. For an autistic Australian, your vibe, the vibe from the community, is get stuffed. You're weird, you're wrong, go away. Loneliness, isolation, exclusion, discrimination. Do you think that might have something to do with the life expectancy, the mortality rate, the depression? Do you think that's got... Yeah, obviously. More of the report. Significant numbers of autistic people report having no friends other than family or paid staff. Okay, so let's do this from...
My only friend was my son. My best friend was my son. I'm not only out my son who I raised, but I am out my best friend. And he literally was my best friend. My only friend. Other than my wife.
From a kid's point of view, right? Okay, so my son, he's got his mum, his dad, his little brother, and paid staff for us would be, I guess, support workers, right? You love support workers. They do stuff you want to do. They take you places. They look after you. They're paid to be a friend kind of thing. Adults, I could say the only friends you could have are your family and your workmates. But are they really, like, they are your friends because you see them and you work with them and you think they are your friends, but in many respects, they're just being friendly because they're your workmates, right? Okay, so more of the stats. Likewise, many families say they feel unwelcome at community events or unable to leave the house due to negative public reactions to their, now this sentence, I'm going to read it verbatim, to their child's autism. It should read, in my opinion, due to negative public reactions to their autistic child. The report, in effect, surmises what's just been talked about, saying behind each set of numbers are thousands of autistic children and adults, autistic with a lowercase a, I think it should be a capital A anyway, who have been denied the opportunity to fulfill their potential and live healthy, safe and productive lives, as well as scores of family who have been pushed to breaking point. I'm a husband, I'm a father, right? Me and my wife have an autistic child, and we know the challenges of raising autistic kids, or the challenges, I'm assuming, of raising any child who may have, special needs, which I find uncomfortable to say that. They have different needs. Anyway.
Different needs.
I get it's hard. This is about autistic people. If we can help autistic people, guess what? The families won't be at breaking point so often. I'm not trying to offend autistic parents. I am autistic. And I am a dad of an autistic son with a neurotypical wife. I live this life. I understand this life. I'm not trying to get into an argument with you. There is no argument. I'm an autistic person. I'm having my opinion. But what it smacks of to me is the consultation period. They consult a lot of organisations which are run by, from my experience in Australia at least, mothers and fathers of autistic kids. Now, these mothers and fathers aren't autistic. They aren't diagnosed autistic, or they haven't disclosed they're autistic. So you have to take it as they're neurotypical. So that smacks of, appeasing the big organisations run by non-autistic mums and dads. Frankly, I'm a little bit, I'm conflicted. I'm not too sure about this anymore. In 2022, with these statistics, I don't think there should be any more organisations in Australia for the autism community that are run solely at the top by neurotypical people. It doesn't make any sense. You can put it into any other scenario and you explain how it makes sense. So you've got a neurotypical person at the head of an autistic organisation for autistic people. Should a white person be the absolute head of an organisation whose sole goal is to service the needs of people of colour? Most people would say, no, that doesn't make a lot of sense. In an ideal world, you want to have someone who actually has an idea of what they're trying to achieve and the people they're trying to serve. How's it different? Okay, so this report is pretty groundbreaking.
And the experience.
Breaking, in that it's basically showing the world, even in 2022, in a country like Australia, autistic people are stuffed. We are stuffed. We're dying between 20 and 30 years before neurotypical peers.
And a lot of that is, like my son, it's suicide.
Outrageous. We struggle in the modern school system, because the modern school system, by the way, isn't modern. It's like 200 years old. You come to work in the morning, you get certain breaks, you must work in between those breaks, then you can go home. And this way we'll teach them how to work for us and not ask questions for the next 30 years. Okay, so it doesn't work. The report states meaningful systemic changes would have an enormous impact, with instances of good practice demonstrating how this can be achieved. No duh. During the course of the inquiry, the committee heard first-hand accounts of the devastating impact that inadequate or inappropriate support has on the lives of autistic people, and here we go again, and their families. The drivers, let's continue.
Okay, so this must not be the same document that had all the well-being stuff in it, because I would have expected to see it by now. So this is a different document.
Drivers of poor outcomes for autistic people are complex and interrelated. That's interesting. I just read the report before and it looked like it was pretty basic to break down the main issues you needed to address here, my friends. education, mental health, support, inclusion. It is clear to the committee there is no single cause of the poor outcomes experienced by autistic Australians. Among other factors, the committee heard that key drivers of poor outcomes for autistic Australians include...
And I wonder how these people, these were probably neurotypical people that do these studies, so how do they go about their study? How did they determine all this stuff? What did they do? I wish I knew the methodology. That's everything.
Poor understanding of autism within the
knowing if you're going to listen to a statistic, if you're going to hear it, knowing the methodology is so important, because usually when I hear about the methodologies, I can just rip it apart for all the potential flaws, and it amazes me just by hearing them how all these potential flaws and so forth come to mind, and it seems like they're completely oblivious to them. Statistics don't lie. Interpretations of those statistics definitely do.
Community and among service providers. This is where I'm going to break stuff down. Okay, so let's talk about this. I don't know everything about every disability. So it's okay to not know stuff about disabilities. It's okay not to know stuff about autism. That's cool. That's why instead of just whinge and whine, I make videos and podcasts just like this to try and help people who want to learn more about autism. That is a work in progress. And my one point I'd say about that is, this is where we need to be lifting up actually autistic people who advocate. Okay, so people who are autistic, we are creating content or advocating for autistic people. Lift these, so I'm one of those people. There's many out there. Lift them up. Stop lifting up professors and doctors and non-autistic people.
Absolutely, and just talk to autistic people about autistic things. Ask autistic people, not Simon Baron Cohen, some idiot that pretends that he knows stuff about autism. Simon Baron Cohen does not know about autism at all. All he has done is hurt the autistic community, but that's a different story. I might spend a week on Simon Baron Cohen. I think I might do that very, very soon.
People who think they can speak on behalf.
I might even get into Simon Baron Cohen this week, maybe even tomorrow. I've been thinking about it for a while. The itch has been itching me, but I do want to continue with this talking about suicide. So I might have to deal with that for the rest of the week. I don't know. We'll just see.
Of us. And the second part of that is they're saying there's a poor understanding among service providers. So for starters, in Australia, in the type of Medicare system that we provide and a lot of government-funded services and supports, the NDIS, National Disability Insurance Scheme, this is a lot of stuff is managed by government. So they're saying that service providers, and sure, there's a lot of private, but they're saying they've got a poor understanding. Okay, well then you failed. You failed. Why don't your service providers have a better understanding of autism? That's your fault. It stops with you. Okay, the next driver, workforce capacity constraints. These are some of the key drivers of poor outcome for autistic Australians. Delays in diagnosis and early intervention. Okay, so there's two parts here. Number one, delay in diagnosis is 100%. There's a lot of adults being diagnosed across the...
Whenever they say early intervention, now this is Australia, but I don't know about Australia, but in the United States, if they say early intervention, that means ABA, period, end of story.
Planet, some women may have been diagnosed with OCD, ADHD, eating disorders when they were girls or teenagers or young women. And in the end, that really wasn't the diagnosis. It could have been a co-occurring, it could have been a misdiagnosis. They've fallen through the cracks. There's a lost generation. I'm part of that lost generation, an adult diagnosis. Okay, yes, you're right. Delays in diagnosis are bad, especially for adults. When you get to 30, 30, 40, you look back and go, where's my life gone? I've lost my life. I'm grieving the life I could have had that I didn't have. It starts now, but what about all that? And then they talk about early intervention. Okay, just when I say intervention, do you think of like someone who...
I don't know if that's a Shure microphone, but whatever microphone that is, that's a really good microphone.
Has a drug or alcohol problem? We're intervening. We must intervene upon the lives of autistic children as quick as possible. Intervene. To intervene on them as autistic people. To what? To what? If you're an alcoholic, we want to intervene so you are not an alcoholic. So if you're autistic, we want to ensure early intervention to ensure what? You're not autistic? Okay, the next part, the next driver. A complex and poorly integrated service environment. I'm moving on from that. Like, seriously. And the final one is, and services that are not designed to meet the needs of autistic people. This is a big one, probably right across the planet.
No. A lack of service. Okay, it isn't that it's a complete lack of services. I don't know that, and definitely in the United States, a lack of services for autistic people, but I would say a lack of services altogether. It isn't, it's like they don't even have any kind of services for autism. They don't even have any services for autistic people to be wrong. or screwed up. That's how bad it is. There just are not autistic services. There's nothing specifically for autistic people.
I know. In Australia, if you're part of the NDIS, so let's say the government provides you with funds for services and things to assist you, they don't meet the needs of autistic people. One of the more stunning things in the report is about poor understanding of autism within the community and among service providers. Now, this is astounding. This is actually in the report. Despite its prevalence, and the fact that autistic people make up the largest single disability group within the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme in Australia. Autism appears to be poorly understood in Australia. So when you say, Senate, when you say appears, what do you mean why do you have to keep single disability group within the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme in Australia? Autism appears to be poorly understood in Australia. And things to assist you. They don't meet the needs of autistic people. One of the more stunning things in the report is about poor understanding of autism within the community and among service providers. Now, this is astounding. This is actually in the report. Despite its prevalence and the fact that autistic people make up the largest single disability group within the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme in Australia, autism appears to be poorly understood in Australia. So when you say...
Okay, so they're saying that in Australia, the largest disability group is autistics. I did not know that. That's crazy.
Sorry, Senate. When you say appears, what do you mean why do you have to keep everyone happy? Don't say it appears to be poorly understood. It bloody is. Half the drivers in the preceding paragraph said it was. You can't say it was and then say, it appears to be. No, it doesn't appear to be. The committee heard that ignorance of autism within the community, as well as stereotypical views of autistic people, present significant barriers to the social and economic inclusion of autistic people. The lack of understanding also extends to providers who deliver services to support autistic people. Seriously. This
providers is doctors, and doctors don't know anything about autism. If you can find a doctor that knows anything at all about autism, you're doing good. And they're going to know just enough to do more harm than good in a lot of cases.
It's 2022. The report goes on to say that generic disability strategies have proven ineffective at improving life outcomes for autistic people. Really? Did that take 3 years? I would never have thought that generic strategies would be ineffective.
Once again, all they had to do was go to the freaking autistic community and ask. They didn't have to do any studies. They didn't have to go try to figure it out. This is just, it pisses me. It pisses me off. How aloof these helpers are, that they won't bother to go to the autistic community to ask us what we already know. Instead, they have to go do studies to figure it out. It is so insulting to me. Whenever I hear these things, if I found out any of these people doing this, I would not want a damn thing to do with them. If they're so stupid and so aloof that they can't go to the autistic community, there's nothing we can learn from them. They are completely useless. Trying to find out crap we already know. Come on! Why should we bother listening to those people? Why should these people even bother to try? It's really sad.
That makes no sense. Hang on. Are you saying generic strategies for people with a disability would be ineffective in improving all people with all disabilities? But they're generic. Generic works every time. So, at the core of the report is the key takeaway: a national autism strategy should form the centrepiece of efforts to improve outcomes for autistic Australians. The next point they make is the National Autism Strategy should be co-designed by the autism community. A couple of issues there.
Yeah.
First thing is, why do you need to put that in a report? Okay, so we've got to come up with a better way of helping autistic people. You know, do you think we should talk to autistic people? Really? What? I guess.
Because they had to.
Put it in the report.
Orion, because they had to. They literally had to put it in there because people are that stupid. And I mean stupid. Not ignorant. Not that they don't know better, but they should know better. The very bottom line is, if you're dealing with blind people, you should be dealing with blind people. If you're dealing with deaf people, you should be dealing with deaf people. Not running an organization on behalf of deaf people when you've never even been around any deaf people and you're not deaf. Or the same thing for blindness. That's just so ridiculous. Or running the organization as a sighted person. Are you kidding me? Wow. Just wow. That's how stupid these people are, and the disregard and the ableism, even for those trying to help us. They are so ableist that they can't even go to us to ask us what we need. They have no idea, so they have to go do studies instead of asking us.
What, maybe someone else? I mean, seriously, the bottom line is, of course, autistic people, the autistic community, autistic people, should be included in this. Mm-hmm. How many podcasts and YouTube videos do people like me have to do before anyone even remotely picks up the phone and has a quick chat, a conversation?
I never had any.
Sakes. So the report states the key.
I've never had anybody ask me. That's for damn sure.
Priorities for the National Autism Strategy should be guided by the recommendations of this inquiry. Okay, it's not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the key priorities identified by the committee.
I'm live almost every day for hours talking about autism. And I've never had one expert ask me about anything concerning autism. I haven't had anyone that runs any committee or runs any program or anything ask me anything about autism. Ever. I don't know if it'll happen. I hope it does. I'll be more than happy to speak or do whatever, but no researcher has done any research. It's simple research like asking autistic people. It's really sad. I've not experienced one, and I would love it if I did.
These are basically what they're saying is these are the big ticket stuff we've got to do. Building understanding of autism within key professions and across the wider community. Okay, firstly, yes, obviously. But if we're going to do that, let's start with the autistic community. We're always going back to the well of neurotypical run organisations for autistic people. And if that clearly hasn't worked, the reports says that. So let's stop going back to the well. All right, next priority. Improving access to early diagnosis and intervention. Okay, well, you know my thoughts on that. Okay, I agree. But there are a few word changes there. We need
be careful with that intervention.
Definitely need to get better access to early diagnosis, not only from a time point of view, but a financial point of view. It's extremely expensive for some families. Extremely expensive. Long waiting lists. So it's not just about, we'll get you through quicker. No, hey, you're going to pay for it too. And we're talking about support services. Services that can enable an autistic person to live their best life. That's what they should be getting access to. Not classes in assimilation and acting neurotypical. Another priority. Improving service, integration and coordination. Yep, it makes sense. I mean, clearly it states that this government and the preceding governments have all failed in that.
I really hate that part of integration. It may be important and everything, but integration basically is saying that we are not part of society, that we need to be integrated into society. That's ableist as hell. I mean, it doesn't get much more ableist than that.
given they've said some astounding things have been found, and they're saying that the service integration and coordination must improve. Okay, you can say, oh no, but we're just putting our hand up and acknowledging it, saying we'll fix it. Well, that's great, but until you've fixed it, you are actually just, waving around. Fix it then. You made a mistake, you stuffed up, you didn't do good enough. Do better, do it now. The next priority. Improving education, employment and health services for autistic people. This is massive.
And improving education, I am all about mentors. And I'm talking, if the kid likes Teletubbies, you find a Teletubby mentor. And I don't care if they're 12 years old or 20 or 30 or whatever else. Find whatever their interest is and find a mentor in that. Because you're going to have, if you caught, coddle? Or if you take care and grow it like a plant, like you're getting it the best, most nutritious soil, the best, cleanest air, the right kind of oxygen, the right amount of light and so forth, and you do everything you can with the plant, you're likely to have a plant that'll grow really well. But if you just have a plant that you just throw outside, it may or may not live. In the same way, there's so many autistic people that could be professors if we got the help with the education that we needed, if we got the tutoring that we needed. I would definitely be a professor, for sure, if I had had the opportunity to get the education, if I had had people helping me to get the education.
Massive. Education. Like we said, the report found barely get to year 12. Now, you've seen my videos and podcasts. I got to uni, studied law, but I didn't graduate. I quit with barely a semester left because I'd reached the point. I couldn't navigate that neurotypical system anymore. And the types of inclusions they gave me, they just weren't relevant. They weren't helpful. You can't give someone more time to write an essay or do an exam if they never got the content in the first place. Giving me an extra week to write an essay doesn't help if I still haven't got what they're trying to teach me. Does that make sense? It's broken. It's broken. Employment's the same. The HR policies, right? You have to be neurotypical. And the fake made-up term being professional. There's kind and compassionate and considerate and respectful. They're real things. But professional, that's basically saying that's a word for HR to use to make you behave a certain way. But if you have a different brain,
it's act professional is like what is it? Article 13, it's the catch-all. Was it Article 13 or 11? Which was the catch-all where they can just by saying you're just not being professional, that could mean anything. It doesn't mean anything at all, which is great. So they can just throw down that wasn't professional. So anything they don't like, that's not professional, period. So it doesn't mean anything. It's a bullshit term, and it's a dangerous, hurtful term. It really is. I used to like it, but professionalism is bullshitism.
You can't just do that. Supporting parents and carers is another key priority.
Which is all that Autism Speaks does. They don't give a crap about the autistic people. And you can see that by the tone of their website.
Okay. And the final one is establishing a national autism research agenda. This is a little bit more tricky for me. What we require...
Research. What are you going to research? I don't know. Research DNA. Everything is all DNA. And this bullshit, we don't need that.
Is autistic-led research. There are plenty of amazing
autistic-led research.
Autistic researchers, PhD candidates, professors, whatever, right? Out there. They have to take the lead. The research has to be relevant and appropriate to improve the lives of autistic people, not some...
And the autistics need to take the lead. That doesn't mean that they have to do everything. But they should be in the lead positions. Absolutely. 1,000%.
Rubbish crap like in the UK where they were trying to get parents to hand over their autistic kids' DNA swab saliva sample. It's got to be specifically focused to autistic people led by autistic people. There's just a couple of things I want to talk about that the committee found on education, because there's a lot of parents and carers out there. Okay, so the committee heard that autistic students and their families contend with gatekeeping practices inadequate consultation, a lack of appropriate adjustments, and high rates of bullying. If you're a parent or carer of an autistic child, who can't relate to that? Oh, that's every day for my kid. That's every day for my autistic son. The report also said that the use of restrictive practices in place of proper behavioural support strategies was also ongoing. Heartbreaking for autistic kids. The report also said that the committee believes that all mainstream schools should work towards becoming inclusive schools, modelled on universal design principles. However, they realise it's going to come at an additional financial cost that many mainstream schools simply aren't resourced to meet. In addition, most teachers and school leaders are already time poor and overburdened. So what they're saying is...
It really varies in the United States how much support you're going to get from the schools, and that depends on the particular district in the particular county and what that particular people wants to do. Look, Lester, I love that.
The lives of autistic people are really bloody crap. And one thing for autistic kids is school. It's bloody horrible. There aren't a lot of specialist schools out there. Mainstream school is often the only real option. It isn't good enough. It needs to get better. Not getting better is, in my opinion, a legal breach. There are actual equal opportunity rights, disability discrimination rights. So the report says they've got to get better. And
with us, it's called the ADA, American Disabilities Act.
Got to do it. But then, you know what? It's going to cost a lot of money and the teachers don't have much time. So what really resonated with me was about uni, college, higher education. In relation to the higher education part, the committee heard that significant numbers of students did not disclose their diagnosis for fear of discrimination. It also found that, well, obviously in not disclosing this means that students are left without support and are exhausted from trying to mask being autistic. The report wrote, mask their autism. In turn, this can result in students withdrawing from their studies. Hello, this is what I just told you my story about law. I did. That's exactly what I did. I would love to have finished, but I just wasn't able to be provided with what I needed as an autistic person.
And I got kicked out, and I think I know it's because I was autistic, because I did some things that threw them off, and when I was in nursing school.
And yeah, you're right. I was exhausted. I was gone. I was shot. I couldn't do it. These are some astounding findings. In modern day Australia 2022, these are the facts. You can check out the entire, 439 pages if you'd like. You can find it, my friends, the Australian government website. It's free. It's available to anyone. The Senate Select Committee on Autism. I hope this has provided some sort of insight into the genuine life of an autistic person in the modern world, not 20 years ago. In the last couple of years. Isn't it heartbreaking and astounding? It's so stark. It's so sad. Hey, thank you so much for watching the video podcast or listening to the podcast, My Friend Autism. I really do appreciate it. Now, if this episode has resonated with you, hello, seriously, I would love it if you'd share it with people, because people need to hear this information. Share it with your family and friends. We want to reach more people. You can continue the conversation. Say hey to me by liking the Orion Kelly page on Facebook. Go to the website, orionkelly.com.au, and send me a message. We are here, my friends, to raise that level of understanding, acceptance, and appreciation of the autistic community. All I'm asking is for you to open up your hearts and minds to people a little bit different to you and embrace the benefits of neurodiversity. Until next time, thank you for opening up your hearts and minds.
All right. I am going to take a quick break, and my wife should be getting home anytime, and I'm going to need to check in with her, and I got to figure out if I can come back. So give me about 5 minutes, and hopefully I will be back. And at that point in time, I'll see if I can continue or if I need to wrap it up for the evening. I'll be right back.
and embrace some differences.
Hi, my name is Stephanie, and
All right, I'm back, and just for a little bit, anyway. I'm gonna continue.
Hello and welcome to Insights from an Autistic. I was reading a study which...
Okay, this is on YouTube. All of this has been Suicide and Its Impact on Autism Asperger's Syndrome, explained by an autistic individual, by Armin... I can't say it. Kodai? I'm totally saying it wrong. Sorry, man. Sorry, Arman. Sorry, Arman.
Implies that there's a possibility that people with Asperger's syndrome are 30 times more likely to commit suicide than those who are not on the autism spectrum. So this is a very alarming finding, but I'm not very surprised. And I think we really need to start thinking about the implications of what the study means and how we can work with people on the spectrum to make this better and to not have such a high suicide rate.
Okay, this is 13 years ago. I mean, so this has been a concern for quite a while in the autistic community.
I think as a society, I've been talking about this in a lot of my talks. I think I might have touched upon in my videos, that we put an emphasis on, as far as success, on success in terms of achievements and the work environment. And many people with Asperger's syndrome are very intelligent, and they do get very successful. They do make some achievements. Some of their achievements or whatnot might be a little bit hindered by the inability to socialize. And so, but I mean, many of us on the spectrum can have, achievements, be financially successful, which is what a lot of the school emphasis and college emphasis is really.
And that's because our worth in society is based on productivity, not humanity. It's not based on you being a human being. That is not what your self-worth is. Your self-worth is in your productivity, and that is translated a lot of times into your income earning ability. And if you have a lower income earning ability, or you are thought to have a lower income earning ability, you are discriminated against and looked down upon. So by rote, essentially, autistic people are looked down upon automatically. We have to start from a negative.
Now, I think this helps people who are not on the autism spectrum having that sort of emphasis in the school environment, because I think that socializing and whatnot is a very big component, and people are so used to it or not on the spectrum. And people not on the spectrum, I think sometimes can get a little bit carried away and go partying and try to have a life outside of work and stuff. Whereas for us on the spectrum, it could be just about work and our obsessions, and we could be closed off from people on the outside. And this can lead to us feeling depressed and lonely because we don't have any friends, we have no one to talk to, we have no romantic relationships. And I think we need to, in high school and especially in college, we need to start preparing another type of success. We need to also prepare people, especially on the autism spectrum, for social success, and say, where do you want your goals to be? Right? You want to be successful in the work environment. Do you want to move up? Do you want friendships? Do you want romantic relationships? And many people on the spectrum know the romantic relationship department. That's a very tough thing.
My son never had a girlfriend as an adult. There was a girl that he fell in love with, and I think that's a lot of what had to do with this suicide.
And we feel lonely, we get depressed, we might say, oh, no girl likes me, shoot ourselves in the head, next thing you know. And so it is time that as a society, and it begins with us, with